Start the meeting. We've got a quorum, and welcome to all the Massey students, I believe, press journalism students. So I don't know how you're going to find this meeting, but it's nice to have you with us. So I will start with the karakia and then we'll get into the public participation. We're going to try and do one paper before morning tea, and then after morning tea, hopefully get through the rest of our agenda. And I would love it if we could still finish at 12:30 or before, which is our designated slot for this morning. We do have quite a bit of business, but some of it is non-contentious, so I'm hoping we can move through those ones quite efficiently. We have, so I'll start with the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, Māori ora. So, apologies. We have a partial apology for absence from the Mayor, and Councillor Pawiwi Kelly is attending online, and apart from that, I haven't had any other apologies. Do I have any now? No? So I move that we accept those apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Rogers. We will vote. And that is carried. So do I have any conflict of interest declarations for matters today? Councillor Chung.
Regarding the Glover Street application, I own a building in Glover Street at number 1 Glover Street, so I don't know if that's a conflict, but I thought I'd bring that up.
What are we deciding with Glover Street?
Number 12.
It's a... Oh, yeah, no, I think you do need to declare a conflict. Thank you for doing so and absent yourself from that decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we don't have any other conflicts. I move that we accept that conflict of interest. Do I have a seconder for that? You don't have to vote on that. Okay, sorry. We hardly ever have them. So it's right, confirmation of minutes. So I move that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 19th of February 2025, which have been circulated and are online. And I move that we confirm that as an accurate record of that meeting. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McNulty. We'll vote on that. And that's passed. So we don't have any items not on the agenda. So we'll move now to public participation, and our first public participant is online. We have Jan Meyer. Jan, welcome. You have 5 minutes to speak to us, and that needs to include questions if you'd like it to. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, good morning. My name is Jan Meyer, and I'm here representing members of the Sweat Gym on Koata Road about the Nio Connection cycle lane. There are approximately 200 members at the gym, and the gym pulls from Lower Hutt, Tawa, Makara, Brooklyn, as well as the surrounding area. It's disheartening to see what has happened to the area over the last few months, and the worst part is that it is immeasurable. We can measure it. Businesses have closed or are in the process of closing, and residential tenants have moved out. Some of these tenants were nurses and have frequently finished at around 11 p.m. at the hospital, and as a result of the parks being there being no parks close by, they've had to walk 10 to 15 minutes from wherever they've found parks. And I'm sure that if you had a daughter, you wouldn't be keen for them to be walking that sort of distance after 11 p.m. on their own. We as members of the gym have found it difficult to find parking, and some had actually discontinued their membership because of it. We're having to park in private commercial areas, which are paid for by tenants like those that have closed down. While the owners of these businesses have allowed us to park there, it is really not an acceptable solution. I liken this to someone parking in the yard at my house, the house that I pay the mortgage on and the Wellington City Council rates on. Sweat is used from 5 a.m. until 7 p.m. 5 days a week, and from 7 a.m. until midday on Saturday. During the week, there is very limited parking on the single side street between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. Why? Because one side of the road now has yellow lines and bollards. The other side of the road is a clearway for cyclists. So where are we meant to park? We have no issue with the morning clearway on the proviso that the other side of the road allows us for parking. There is also a mums and bubs class in the middle of the day. Currently, the mums don't mind having to park a little further away because the weather's great. However, when the weather turns nasty, the decision to come to the gym will differ to the point where inevitably some of them will stop coming. These mums come to the gym not only for socialisation, but also to recover physically. A business like Sweat has many benefits for the community, all that I'm sure you know well. We are perplexed why the draconian yellow lines and bollards have been put in place. We are not sure what data has been used to make this decision. However, we do know that a number of the counters have historically been corrupt. We've been told that an allowance has been made for the corrupt data. However, if the data is corrupt, it is corrupt. Therefore, it cannot and should not be relied upon to make decisions. So again, I come back to what data was used to make this decision. The connections document says some parking removal and parking changes along the route. While subjective, my read of that statement, and in particular the use of the word some, is that changes will be negligible, marginal, minor. However, the as-built outcome is seemingly a fanatical scorched earth approach to parking. The casual language is incongruous with the reality, as all parks have been removed. What we as users of the road know is that the section that has yellow lines and bollards is not used by cyclists for more than 10% of the day. So why can't we use that road to park in? The cycle lane is used only during the return from work hours. Outside of that, it sits unused. The arrangement that was on the road previously worked perfectly well. A clearway between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. All sectors of the community, businesses, motor vehicles and cyclists, should be able to work in harmony with each other. And we felt that the previous situation enabled us to do that. The current arrangement does not allow for this. It only allows for one sector of the community to benefit, the cyclists, at the expense of others. This seems unjust when, in reality, the number of cyclists are low in comparison to the number of motor vehicles using the road and the damage that is being done to the local community. We urge you to take action and have the yellow lines and the bollards removed, and that the area be returned to a clearway Monday to Friday, 4 to 7 p.m, with no time restrictions in place. This needs to be done immediately before this area becomes more of a desert than it already is, and it loses more businesses. And just to remind you that these businesses are not corporates, they are small family-owned businesses just trying to get by. Just to repeat, all sectors should be working together in harmony with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And we do have a question. Jan, sorry. Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, you did ask a question of us around what sort of data was relied on and how we sort of came to the conclusion for the cycleway that was installed. I was just wondering if you had seen on the website the options considered document multi-criteria analysis and the safety and accessible audit that was done for the cycleway?
No, sorry, I missed that.
That's all good. So it's just on the Transport Projects website there under NIO Connections.
Sure. I mean, I'll take a look at it, but again, I come back to Councillor Rogers, the fact that for 10% of the day, that cycle lane is used, and for the other 90% it is not. And I fully understand. I'm a cyclist. I've been a cyclist. So I fully understand. But to work in harmony, we need to be allowing parking and cars to be able to use it, or motor vehicles rather, to be able to use the space. And it shouldn't be restricted to simply one small sector of the community.
Thank you, Jan, and we have actually run out of time, but thank you very much for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move now to Julie, also from Sweat, if Julie's online.
Hi.
Hi, Julie.
Julia.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Julia.
Right.
So, as I explained before, you've got 5 minutes, which needs to include questions if you'd like it to. So, over to you.
Cool. So my name is Julia Aola, and I represent the Sweat Gym owners. Thank you, Jen, also for representing our members. We appreciate that so much. For nearly 11 years, we have been part of this community. But today, I stand before this council once again on this issue, and I must be direct. Businesses around us are struggling. Many have already shut down or relocated, and now we are at risk too. The reason? Parking removal. We need your help. When we started 11 years ago, the location was perfect. Now parking has become so limited that members are frustrated and are leaving. Many of our clients travel from the Hutt Valley, Wairarapa, Porirua and Kapiti on their way to and from work. Before you propose public transport as a solution, unfortunately, it isn't. Bus routes do not service our peak class times, and the Kaiwharawhara train station was actually shut down in our first year of operation. We've survived COVID, huge economic downturns and job losses in the public sector. We've stayed strong, we have built a thriving community, and we have brought foot traffic to local businesses. But parking removal is one challenge we cannot fight alone. Our lease expires next year, and we have one right of renewal. Big decisions will need to be made by our team. Already, fewer trial members are converting to full members because they cannot find parking. Existing members are circling the neighbourhood daily for somewhere to park before classes and then leaving because they cannot find any. If this continues, we will be forced to leave. Over the years, our doors have had many thousands walk through them. That means fewer customers for neighbouring businesses and an empty space our landlord will probably struggle to fill. This isn't just about Sweat Gym, it's about our entire business community here. We are asking for a fair compromise. Please reinstate the clearway on the south side of the road. This means removing the recently added yellow lines and bollards. Outside of the hours of 4 to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, this stretch of space travelling up Kaiwharawhara Road sees little to no cyclist activity. Restoring a clearway during those business hours would provide much needed parking while still preserving a safe route for cyclists during peak commuting times. We are asking the council to please work together with us to find a solution. We don't want to see more businesses forced out due to inaccessibility, and we urge you to please act now before it's too late. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julia. Now, I don't know if we've got any questions. I actually was wondering about your numbers, because I think both you and Jan alluded to losing gym membership. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
It's hard to quantify. I mean, we're just constantly having complaints about people not being able to find anywhere to park. I would say since parking has become an issue, we've probably lost about 25%, which is a lot for a small business like ours. Yeah, it's a lot, and I can see that increasing as the frustration grows.
And you also mentioned other businesses moving out. Do you have a lot of detail about that, or is it just sort of something that you're aware of?
We're aware of it. There was a cafe across the road that closed down not that long ago, which has kind of always been in operation by different business owners since we moved into the area. Backhouse is gone now as well. They also struggled with the parking issues too.
Okay, thank you. I got a question from Councillor Calvert, and if we have time, one from Councillor Chung.
Thank you for coming, speaking with us. I also heard from a business just down the road from you, which was open for takeout coffees and that, and I understand that they're going to be, because of the restricted parking, they're now closing from the 8th of March. Are you aware of that one?
I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, so that's, yeah. You'll know which one I'm talking about. I won't name them specifically, but yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Sorry, I was just going to mention, I think we're talking about the same restaurant there, same cafeteria there. I was there for a coffee yesterday and they told me they were closing down next week. Thank you.
All right. Oh, yes, it was meant to be a question, but never mind. Right, I think that does bring us to the end of the questions, and thank you, Julia, for your presentation. It's been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're now moving to Brian Park. He's here in person. Welcome, Brian.
I'm a business owner and resident over 25 years in Kaipara Road. I own residential apartments, Airbnb, retail operations on the street. The removal of parking spaces over the last couple of years has had a really detrimental effect on all my activities. In particular, things like deliveries and pickups, parking for tenants, short-term guests and contractors from outside Wellington, and staff. This will only get worse with what's proposed and with the clearway being extended. And we'll see more businesses relocate. We're well aware of the ones that have already moved and others who are struggling. The clearway on the south side is acceptable between 4 and 7, 5 days a week. That works. We can get round that. But we need those parks at other times. As other speakers have noted, the cycle lane is not used at all during the day. And even the weekends, it's minimal. And of course, the weekends, there's very few bus services going up there, so it doesn't need to be a clearway. I'm not aware of the data on the usage of the cycle lanes, but I'll certainly look at that online. The other issue is the design has created very dangerous outcomes. As many cyclists do not adhere to the road rules, especially excessive speed, undertaking other vehicles. Also, the entry and exit crossings into our dockways and buildings are particularly dangerous. The other point that was raised by an earlier speaker, the reinstatement of the footbridge at Kaipara Station would certainly help the solution with commuters, workers from the area, and residents in the suburbs. Just on the issue of cyclists, one of my problems, and I've had a number of almost altercations and run-ins with cyclists, is that they are not registered in any way. We don't know who they are. We cannot report their illegal activities, and that's very frustrating because it's a disaster waiting to happen. That's all I've got to say at this stage. Any questions?
Yes, I actually did have one. So you did talk, thank you very much, Brian. You did talk about the removal of car parking spaces over the last 2 years. So I just wondered if you could elaborate a bit on that, because I thought we were talking about a change just recently.
Well, we went through the so-called consultation process, which was farcical. It was a fait accompli. We had a number of meetings in our area, and what has eventuated, we were told originally that it was going to be a 2-year trial. We've been through that, and now we're seeing the proposal for a full clearway. No extra parking anywhere.
Oh, I see. So you're saying this has been a long-ish process, which is
Well, you'd be
firstly the
of course it has been going on.
Yeah, okay. Are there any other questions? There's Councillor Chung there.
Thanks so much for coming in, Brian. You're talking about, you're representing a lot of other businesses down there. Can you tell me if there are any businesses that actually favour the changes? Does it actually benefit them by having cyclists coming up there?
I can't think of any. No one's certainly spoken to me about that. We know the other side of the road, Backhouse, have gone. The business that Diane was talking about, the roastery, they're they're moving their, taking away their takeout food, their cabinet food, and copies. We know the body shop's gone, and that's a warehouse now for Zip, so it doesn't really impact them, being a warehouse. We own the building across the road from us, which has got the tile world on the ground floor. We've had problems getting them to renew their lease. They do have, fortunately, 4 off-road car parks. And likewise, my neighbour, Tile Space, they have probably about 8 or 10 off-road. So, no, they're hanging out there, but no, I haven't got any other.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. We have run out of time, but thank you very much for that feedback. We'll move now to Hugh Kettle from Waterside Karori AFC. Is that online? Yes. Welcome, Hugh. I don't know if you've been here to hear me say to other submitters that there's a 5-minute slot and that needs to include questions if you'd like it to. It will go by quickly. Over to you.
Thank you. So I'm supporting on behalf of Waterside Karori Football Club, of which I'm the chair, and Karori Park Sports Club, which is the joint, is effectively the ground lessee of the sports facility, club rooms at Karori Park. A review of the on-street car parking that's been removed within 200 metres of Karori Park. I'll just give, we have submitted on this before as part of the original process. We are not anti-cycleway or anti-cyclist. We are entirely focused on the amenity value at Karori Park, which is the part of this network that we, that our clubs care about. Our individual members can make whatever submissions they want on the broader Karori Connections type program. That's up to them. They'll have the wide range of views. I guess now the bollards have been implemented, the parks have been removed. It's cricket season, not football season. Cricket have got about 1/3 to 1/4 of the number of players and movements that we have in the winter season. The winter season's coming up, and we just see it as being a shambles waiting to happen, to be honest. The council had done parking analysis for the alternative parking within, I think it was 200 metres of the perimeter of Karori Park, but that doesn't really factor in how big the area is, and there's no chance of people parking up the top of Sunshine Ave to walk with 3 kids down to the Tirafiti turf, which ends up being about 1 kilometre. So I think that sort of analysis of which tended to downplay the value of the loss of the car parks was, I think the methodology is flawed, given the sort of, it's not comparing apples with apples. In terms of, trying to be, the other elements that we sort of already noted, the cafe's already, the day car park at Karori Park's already full of park and ride commuters, playground users, general park users. One of the probably unintended consequences, and this is anecdotal, of setting up the bollards along Karori Road is the new congestion in South Karori Road as people do school drop-offs for Karori West School. So there's actually become, again, I've heard this from several of our members, that there's actually South Karori Road's getting congested as if people can't now stop to drop their kids off. They have to go down there, do a U-turn, create sort of dangerous traffic movements. So that's just, I guess, an unintended consequence. To be constructive, there are some really easy alternative options here if the bollards alongside Karori Park were to be removed. First is a shared path outside Karori Park on the existing footpath, which is very wide. It would be quite easy to have shared cyclist and pedestrian access on that. Second is probably making it a clear way for the commuter time zones, 6 to 9, Monday to Friday. We've looked at the council data for the counter at 422 Karori Road, and there's never more than 20 cyclists coming through there over that 3-hour block. So it's the data that we've seen is that it's a very small sort of amount of users. Who knows how many of them are new or not? And I guess the final point on there is that there's already a perfectly good secondary route through Karori Park. It doesn't involve any capex. Going around the outside of the paved path of Karori Park through Fernley and Marshall Street and join Karori Road wherever the commuters want to. So there are very credible alternatives that don't require large expenditure, and we're just really keen on restoring the amenity value. I'll be quiet now and open it up to any questions anyone's got of me.
So we do have quite a few. Councillor Abdurrahman, then Councillor McNulty, then Councillor Rogers to start with.
Kia ora, Hugh.
Can you keep them tight because we are...
Cool. My question is, people who come for this sport places also they bike sometimes, and how do you think the coexistence can continue for those who want to play and dropping their kids to sport places alongside those who want to bike to that space? And the shared paths sounds a good idea, but it also comes with its own downside. Could you just say a bit on that?
Yeah, I think realistically, very, very few. I mean, some of our members will bike to games, but if you've got 3 kids in tow, you've got a quick turnaround. People are going to different sporting events. People are driving there. That's the local residents. But we have people from as far afield as Napier, Miramar, the Wairarapa, Kapiti Coast, all coming to have their away games at Karori Park. So cycling and public transport is just simply no realistic option for them.
Okay, thank you. We do need to keep our answers. Thank you for a concise answer. We'll keep moving. So, Councillor McNulty next.
Just quickly, I mean, if we were looking at engineering a solution here, is this really a Saturday-Sunday issue? Is that really where our focus should be in terms of utilising space?
Yeah, the Te Whiti parking is busy on on afternoons and evenings, but generally the Karori Park side of things, it is more of a weekend issue.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could describe how many families are coming to games and how many off-street car parks are available there at Karori Park? Just because it's not my ward, so I'm not totally familiar.
Okay, I can't give you the exact number of car parks, but I can tell you that in the winter we run 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and there's a turnaround of about 80 kids per hour. So every hour, 80 kids turn up with families in tow, then turn around and go home and get replaced by the next lot. So there's a huge number of traffic movements, and so the parking gets churned very quickly.
I'll just ask a quick one. So this is more of a winter sport problem than the summer sport problem, are you thinking?
Well, cricket it's already congested down there on a Saturday now, with cricket having a third or a quarter of the people on the ground that we have. So while I'm focused on football, the problem has already started in summer, and it's just going to get worse as we go into winter.
Okay, thank you. We are out of time, but that's been very useful feedback, and we appreciate your efforts in coming to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Right, so we will now move to Patrick Morgan from Cycle Wellington. Patrick, welcome. Just because of our time constraints, we're kind of trying to keep to 5 minutes, but we can stretch a little if there are a lot of questions.
Kia ora katoa, councillors and Pauwi Kelly watching at home. Thank you for your attention. I'm here to talk primarily about the traffic resolutions that you're deciding on today, but I'd just make a general note that you've passed policies to create a cycling network, Pāniki Ponake, and you have a parking strategy. So the questions before you are your decisions today consistent with those strategies? Parking and traffic is a system, and every time we pick away at it, we really weaken the system. So I'd encourage you to be consistent with your parking, your transport and your cycling strategies. In terms of specifics, traffic resolutions, Mersey Street, Island Bay, we support this. We also suggest that a 30km/h zone would be helpful around the school gate to reduce risk and make drop-offs easier in that part of town. You've got a traffic resolution in Rintoul Street. Cycle Wellington supports this to provide access for this resident. Thinking about Molesworth Street, this is traffic resolution number 8. Again, we support this as long as there's physical separation between the parking that's reinstated by the High Court and the bike lane. And I see a comment from your staff that yes, there's a metre gap there and physical separation. Let me see. The other one I wanted to comment on was number 14, TR 1425 on Molesworth Street. Again, we support this. It removes a traffic pinch point around the Molesworth cycleway layout. And lastly, Arawa Street in Hātepe, again, support from cyclists. It improves access for people who require mobility parking. I see you have a bit of time left, and I see there's some interest in cycling, so perhaps I'll could comment on those if you have questions.
Yep. Were you wanting to say a bit more? Oh, questions. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I will. Just, you know, I've read through the submissions. I've heard the speakers today, and I respect the fact that businesses are doing it hard in a business downturn amid government cuts. That is really distressing. I have a lot of sympathy for businesses who are doing it hard. The issues that we've heard raised today and in submissions, I don't see anything new that we haven't heard before that we went through in consultations on bike lanes over the last 2 years. So I'd be just cautious about picking apart what you've achieved, your commitment to a better transport system on the basis of issues that have been well considered in the past. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Thank you. Questions? I think we had Councillor Chung. Yes.
Thanks very much for coming in this morning, Patrick. Much appreciated. When you refer back to previous council decisions, I think that, do you think that
Be a question,
the
right?
decisions that were actually made years ago, we need to actually constantly monitor them to find out if the decisions that were made are still applicable now with changes in the environment, different ways of people doing things. So don't you think that we should actually keep an eye on to see whether they're still working, to see if they're still valid?
I absolutely agree we should have an open mind, and I would say we need to extend the transition of transport choices in Wellington. We need to work with the Regional Council to further improve public transport, further improve walking and cycling. There's a global shift in this direction, so please keep an open mind on that. Thank you for your question, Ray.
We have got quite a few on the list, Ray. So I'm going to just go to Councillor Rogers. I think Councillor McNulty was signalling a question, and then Councillor Abdurrahman, then if we've got time.
Yeah, my question was, in some of the work that you've done, have you sort of seen how long it takes for connected networks like this to embed in, and perhaps what having something like a clearway instead of a cycleway would do for people's desires to use a cycle to get around the city?
Sure. So, again, transport is a system, and if people can't rely on it, if they are unsure of what times a day it operates, it erodes the quality of the system and lowers the level of service. In the same way that, you know, trains being replaced by buses, it just drives people to other choices. Again, part-time clearways, putting bikes on shared paths, it erodes the level of service, it erodes confidence, and I don't think it's the way to go. People on bikes do travel 24/7, just like everyone else. So despite anecdote about a bike lane being empty or not, you know, it's possible to produce photos of car lanes that are empty as well. It really proves very little.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just that word anecdote. The cycle counter data hasn't been updated since June last year.
Yes.
So we're in a data black hole as far as I see. So what basis or valuations do you have around the success or otherwise of the changes we've made so far, given that lack of empirical data?
And I hear some frustration from you there, Councillor. And I am dying to get my hands on the data, which council staff tell us should be available in March. I'm very cautious of anecdata, but I think everyone in Wellington can see there's been an explosion in use of bike lanes as the council extends the network. This morning I rode from Newtown into Oriental Bay. You know, we need more space at the traffic islands and the lights for bike lanes. It's a massive success for this council, something you should be proud of and something you should keep going with. And as the network develops, we will see more and more people choosing cycling as a way to get around our city.
Councillor Abdurrahman, then we'll have to draw it to a close.
Cool. Patrick, how do you see the coexistence, a good working with both community, those who want to drive and the bike, taking Wakefield Park as a case example. How do you see that being achieved in other areas?
Sorry, I missed the last part.
Wakefield Park as an example.
Wakefield Park?
Yeah, because where we achieved net zero car park loss,
Yes.
while we have a good cycling infrastructure as well.
Yes.
That is something that we should be aiming for Karori as well. So could you
Question,
comment
yeah.
on that one?
Okay.
Sure. I mean, I think you've seen adjustment in behaviour at Wakefield Park, where people do figure out ways to get to their sport. More people sharing a vehicle is an obvious way to go. Most vehicles have 4 or 5 seats, and I know that people are adapting their behaviours there. Councils love to add things and not take things away. In terms of Karori Park, you've made some decisions there about reallocating road space to prioritise cycling. Again, I'm confident that people can adapt and adjust their behaviour, and for most people it will work out. So thank you for your commitment to your cycling plan.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. We're well and truly out of time, but it was, I think, important to have your perspective. So thank you.
Councillors.
Right, so we will move now to, we actually have had someone pull out, so that's helped with our time. So we'll now move to John Thomasson from the CQW Body Corp. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you. My name is John Thomasson. I'm respectfully addressing Traffic Resolution 135 regarding Barnett Street and Clyde Key car park proposed changes. I'm speaking to you in the capacity as chair of the Clyde Key Body Corporate. We have 76 apartments and over 100 residents and several commercial units on the wharf. Given what's already been said in the written feedback, I'll try and keep this really brief. We are against the proposed changes put forth for 2 reasons. One is that many of these metered parking spaces in front of our building are used by a lot of home health care workers, tradesmen, and other visitors to the building. And 2, we have 3 and soon to be 4 commercial businesses on Clyde Key Wharf that rely on some measure of parking nearby for their customers, as do other waterfront businesses near us and along the waterfront. I acknowledge that the parking spaces in front of Clyde Key Wharf would be metered P120 between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. However, this is only if spaces are available and not already taken by marina residents who are exempt from having to pay any meters. In reality, what this means is marina residents can leave their cars permanently in these spaces without penalty for days, weeks, or even months on end. And we know this already happens at some level with cars in the marina-only parking lot in front of Raglan Roast Coffee, and there's every reason to believe this will happen in front of Clyde Key as well. I also acknowledge that the parking changes would require the marina-only spaces in front of Raglan Coffee to be filled first before marina-only spaces in front of Clyde Key Wharf. However, this is unrealistic and actually unenforceable. How will parking enforcement know when there was no parking in front of Raglan at any given time? Lastly, I do acknowledge that there will remain 8 metered P120 parking spaces on the wharf level and underneath our level 1 apartments. However, these are more often than not already taken and not easy to access due to the concrete pillars, the narrow roadway along the wharf, and of course, the harbor. For the record, we have no issue with adding 1 additional accessible parking space as proposed. It remains our hope at the very least that a negotiated solution would be possible that moves some of the marina spaces, but not all of them. While this would be less than ideal for the residents of the building and for this, and possibly for Wellington City Council, it would still meet the partial needs of our residents and our commercial businesses. Thanks for the opportunity to provide the feedback, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. One from Councillor Rogers.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to make submissions, and I saw a lot of people did. One of the things that I couldn't quite understand, because I haven't been under the building, was if there are any sort of private car parks in there that are reserved for members of your building?
No, so when we say underneath, we're not talking about underneath down a ramp and underneath the building.
Yeah.
We're talking about 8 parking spaces that are P120 on the wharf level. So when you drive around the wharf, which is a public right-of-way, there actually are 8 P120 spaces. I should point out that there's no parking enforcement on them right now. Not anecdotally, like there actually is no signage. So they're going to work on trying to get, because they can't issue tickets for anyone right now. But I have word that they're working on that.
Right, so there's no private car parking available for your residents?
No, there is underneath the building. Those are spaces that we own and pay rates on.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Can I just clarify that, because I'm quite interested too? Do most people have a car park, or only a few of your residents have one of those car parks?
Every resident of the building has at least one car park underneath the building.
I see.
Which is private. You know, those are.
Okay, yeah, they're obviously like having a garage or something.
Yeah, but I shouldn't say everyone, because our commercial residents don't.
Okay.
I mean, they're businesses.
Okay, that's useful. We do have time for one more. Sure. Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks so much for coming in. You mentioned about some people that were parking there for long term, just not moving there. Are they residents in the building?
No, well, they can be, but just because the way to get a marina sticker for your car is if you have a boat in the marina. So there is a resident, or two, I can name at least one, that has a boat, and I would have a sticker. But most people in the building do not have boats at the marina, so they're not residents of our building.
Oh, I see.
Did
Great.
that answer your question?
Yep, it does.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I think that might be it. I don't see any other questions, but thank you very much. It's useful to hear from your perspective.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll move now to Stephen Dwight from, I hope I've said that correctly, from TNR. Welcome, Stephen.
Good morning, my name's Stephen Thwaite. I'm from 12 Glover Street. I'm the owner-occupier of the premises. Some time ago, we built a new warehouse on our premises to try and improve our efficiencies with regard to minimising our outside storage in a number of facilities and in contract warehousing. And in doing so, we had a roading contribution submitted to us as part of our our permit, our building permit. And initially it was around about $30,000. It was reduced by Rob Anderson to $14,000 for a road contribution, which we thought was quite unfair. And for us to go forward, he asked us to provide concrete evidence with regard to the reduced amount of truck movements within our building. We produced that information, which was concrete not only from ourselves, but also from an invoicing point of view from our road transport people, our storage people, which proved that we reduced our truck movements by the facility of 630% to 12 Glover Street, along with our own internal movements of our own two trucks. And we submitted this, and we feel that the expert one has either is totally dismissed the information provided, or just has not read it properly. So what I'm really asking from you people is to be fair and reasonable with regard to $14,000 still for a 630% reduction in road traffic in a kilometre point of view is fair. I'm not asking you to give me a credit for the reduction in road movement. I'm just asking you to be fair and reasonable with regard to this $14,000. We think it's just still too high going forward. Any questions?
We do have a question from Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, thanks for sending all of your information through. I read it quite thoroughly. One of the things I think you have illustrated is that your business has made a reduction in your road traffic. The consideration that I believe we're making today is about, has the development increased road traffic use? And I guess one of the things that I would wonder if you had considered is the building that you are no longer using. Would people still be using that building? Because in essence, if a different use is then being used for that building, it is in addition to the city's road users, as opposed to just in your business unit.
Those two buildings are actually in Lower Hutt, Brentwood contracting and Main Freight in Lower Hutt. They were the two people there. So the question is, it's a good question. I presume they've filled that space, but from our perspective, our road usage is, the amount of truck movements coming into our warehouse is reduced. We bring the containers to our warehouse around about 23, 24 a year, the van there. We no longer transport them out to Brentwood, then transport them back to ourselves. And in actual fact, we've reduced one truck in our warehouse. We no longer need it going forward. Cool. So all I'm asking is to be fair and reasonable. That's all.
Cool. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No, it doesn't look like it, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
We'll move to Elspeth Dwight and Jeanette Wong from the Whero Bay Community Garden Society. Welcome, you're here in person. Lovely. You are welcome to sit at the table if that's more comfy. Right. And can you just make sure you do turn the mics on? There's a button at the front.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, that should be fine.
Hello.
You do need. Yep. That's good.
That
you
good?
do need to get them a little bit reasonably close. All right. Over to you.
Did you want to go first?
Have I managed to work? That's always a question with hearing from us.
We can be a tiny bit flexible.
It's a busy morning, I know, so we've tried to squeeze what we needed to say. Thanks for hearing from us about our proposed new licensed area. I know you've got some background in the agenda, so we don't need to go over that again. We loved our original licensed area that was next to the stream. It was very dearly loved, and we were blessed with a very large 4,000 square metre area. And it's been very sad and frustrating for us to have to give that away because of the cessation of our private access. Our preferred option was to stay there, but council were not able to help us do that. And we accept their reasoning there, and so we're now supporting this move to this proposed site further along Happy Valley Road, and we can, in our choice of supporting this site, we've thought about wind and the site access and contour and water supply and potential land contamination. So we worked with staff to look at a couple, but this was the one we felt was the best for us. Naturally, we think that community gardens are a really important part of community facilities in the city. They're not often seen as a sort of community or recreation space because we don't often have buildings, but they are really, really important. And growing food, as you'll know, supports community connection. Carbon emissions, it's much better to have local food. And it's resilient, right? You can probably remember, if you like kumara, when you couldn't buy any after Cyclone Gabrielle because 90% of those Northland crops got wiped out. And those of us who were sitting on our own supplies in Wellington were feeling very fortunate. There are two types of community gardens in Wellington. There's some which have little beds, typically outside a community centre, and you kind of get, a couple of square metres of shared space. There are also some functioning and long-standing allotment-style gardens where people are really producing quite reasonable amounts of foods, and our one was one such garden, as is Tenera Park, Inamo's Gardens, and Miramar. Having these bigger gardens is really important for meaningful food production. So the smaller ones let people get the experience, and but if you really want to grow food, you are needing that kind of bigger space. We hope you can keep providing these spaces because with the push for densification and tighter use of the city land in our homes, it's actually more important to provide those growing spaces and green spaces outside people's private property. Within the Owhiro community, we've heard a little bit that some residents would prefer that the community gardens are just used by local residents. We had a wee look at our members, so about a third of people actually do live in the Owhiro community, but in conjunction with other community gardens, we haven't limited our access criteria because we haven't needed to. Normally, if people want to come, that's enough. And obviously, I live in Berrimport, and so if you sort of follow that line of thinking, I could never go to a swimming pool or a library because we don't have one of those. So we kind of see it as a shared community asset. And my phone's just helpfully gone off, so that's probably time to hand over to Jeanette.
Kia ora, everyone. Yep, my name is Jeanette Wong, and I'll make mine short now. I've been a gardener and a committee member for Whero Bay Gardens, and my journey with the society has been full of challenges, fun, successes, and I started there 14 years ago, so been there a while. But what I'm trying to say today is that the Society's vision for this new community garden is a simple but a strong one. We want to have allotment-style gardening where individuals and families can grow their own food, a communal area where the gardens can have people have a shared space, share knowledge and supporting each other, have organic growing methods and promoting sustainability and food security. And also, hopefully we can form partnerships with the school next door and the kindergarten and local residents to encourage learning and engagement with nature. We want these community gardens to be for everyone and to be a place for healing, sharing and learning. Robert Tavare, the founder of Mokoakanga, was the key figure in creating this environment, which is where we were before, and we hope to continue his legacy. I get emotional with this one. Our society is seeking support from and consent from the Wellington City Council and the community to make this project a reality. If we work together, we can create something meaningful for Owhera Bay and something that will last for generations. The establishment of these gardens aligns with Wellington City Council's goals for resilience in communities, sustainability and urban greening, to create an inclusive space that promotes well-being, social interaction and biodiversity, and to encourage waste reduction through composting and organic gardening methods. So, yep, I just raced through that. And thank you, councillors.
And I noticed the Deputy Mayor's online. Of course, she's one of your biggest supporters and a local. So I'm going to give her the chance to ask a question.
Okay.
Kia ora, Elspeth and Jeanette. Thank you for coming in. And thank you for articulating how many locals are part of the garden. I just want to understand, would you be open to the school, building relationships with the school and the school being part of the garden? And another question is, do you feel like the community garden is an impediment to the neighbourhood at all?
Thanks, Laurie. Should probably call you Mayor, Deputy Chair Mayor Foon in this setting. We have informally, because we haven't been given the area yet. So in anticipation that we may be given it, we had contacted the school and the kindergarten who were both really enthusiastic to hear about our plans because we are very close. The proposed site would be very close to them. And because we had in our proposed plan wanted to support them by setting aside an area to be used by the learning community, which would hopefully complement the existing Gardens to Table program, which is running at Owhera Bay School, but they're very excited to hear that they could get a bit more space and also just some more adult supporters to kind of share the knowledge. In terms of impediment to the local community, I hope not. I don't believe so. I think of all the types of neighbours one could end up with, we're quite nice. And listen, the only thing that really springs to mind is in our old site, there were some people who were concerned about rats. And we did have volunteers from our Garden Society who trained out with Predator Free to manage pests on the site, but we've actually seen a big increase in the pests coming back since we closed down because Jeanette's still
baiting them,
there, and actually the rat population is booming.
Yeah. Okay.
So we are controlling that less pleasant aspect.
Okay. Well, thank you. We will have to draw that to a close, but thank you for all of that useful feedback and information.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we've got last for today, Peter Carter. And I'm sorry we're running a little bit behind time, but not too badly, but a little bit. Peter, are you here? Yeah. Wonderful. Welcome.
Morning, kia ora katoa. Councillors.
It is meant to be 5 minutes. We've run a little over with some of the organisation presentations.
I've come along today a little bit unprepared.
Oh, that's fine.
Very unprepared, considering the implications for both my house and the community. I just don't feel that we were notified properly that this was going through so quickly. I became aware of this plan when I ran into council officer taking photos on the back of the section and told me what she intended to do and that it was a foregone conclusion. And she's basically promised this to Hātepe Gardens. And there was some confusion with myself and the two other neighbours directly affected by this proposal. Like, the reserve is directly on our boundary, and we were expecting, we were told that this was just part of the process and we would give our submissions to the council. So I'm afraid we don't have our submission. I've been working on a PowerPoint submission. My house is the one the most affected by this use of this land because it has public access on 3 sides, from Hātepe Main Road and from 2 sides of the Scenic Reserve. And I've been there 25 years and I've kept that reserve mown and clear and tidy of weeds and open to public access. And campers have asked if they can go in there, and I said, no, this is public property. It's frequently used by people walking down a beautiful walkway down the back of the school and coming out, access to the stream. So it's very popular. It's in the centre of a community. It has really serious traffic during the week from the school, and during the weekends, heavy traffic, you know, and there's a lot of different considerations to take into account because I was expecting that the community would be informed by a letterbox drop, as we are by all of the other changes to our roading, and that all the residents would be made aware in advance. So, and I'm feeling that we need to, you know, be in proper consultation with the residents because this is a residential area.
Okay. I do have a question.
Yes.
Maybe that's a good way for us to get a bit more clarity. What is your biggest fear about the change from a point of view of your own, you know, your own property borderingness? Because there might be ways of kind of addressing that.
I don't really think there are ways of addressing it. It's part of a scenic reserve, and it's a significant open space. O'Whero Bay has a lot of open spaces, and it's an attractive suburb, and this is part of that. And this is going to detract from that use. There are other options, good options for this garden. It happens to be one of the most attractive areas in the community, and I would like to see it stay that way. It's also a question of my own personal security. I've been burgled a couple of times because I'm on the end of a row of houses, and there's access from all sides to look in, and because the ground is higher, you can look right into the house from where people are. So not only would I have neighbours, I would have visual intrusion from all sorts of people. They're not just neighbours, which would be one thing, but they're people from all over the city. And there's also, that would probably be my biggest fears, and it also lowers the value of the house, and it's just recently gone down by 30%, as everyone will be aware.
Okay, we do have another question from Councillor Chung. Oh, and no.
Great, thanks very much for coming, Peter. You mentioned to me that that section at present is actually a pathway leading further into that area. Will that access still be available if the garden was actually put in there? Have the council officers told you about this?
No, they haven't. And what that is it's one of the 3 access ways into a large scenic reserve. There's one on Frobisher Street, there's one on Jordan Street above us, and it's been there as a access for council workers. They still use it to get into that 6 hectares of land, which is a reserve, and it's there for that purpose. There's also access to the new sewer that's been put in on that property, the main branch sewer for Happy Valley Road, and also the council workers come in and they inspect and monitor the quality of the stream. So I'm just trying to focus on your question, Councillor Chung. The access through it, we've had customary access to the back of our properties, and that's another issue. It is a reserve, but I've been there 25 years, my neighbour 38, and the other homeowner something like 50 years, and they're just changing this, they're planning to change that.
I think if I can just...
Okay, yep, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think Councillor Abdurrahman, did you have your hand up and I missed it before?
Yep.
And we'll make that the last one.
Cool. Thank you, Peter. The community, the gardening community, they are good people, and this is not their number one preference, but they will just end up without no options. But what you're saying is you are not consulted, and your neighbors were not also consulted, and you wanted that to be at least to get that opportunity. Is that what you're asking?
That's right, not really properly consulted, and I wanted to approach all the neighbours in conjunction with the Residents Association.
Okay.
And a proper consultation. And I have been up and down the street, and since retirement, semi-retirement, I've met a lot of people in the street, personally met them, and not one homeowner has said that they would prefer to have this on their boundary. There is another very good option in the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming in and for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, that brings us to the end of... So we're going to move now to our first paper, which is the proposed road closures, and then hopefully morning tea after that. Thanks to everybody who has submitted this morning. So we have 5 road closures that we're approving today if all goes well. And Sean's come up to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, councillors. It gives me great pleasure to bring to you some regular event road closures for our city. So these events are the Scorching Bay Triathlon, the Barefoot Triathlon out in Scorching Bay. So in March we have the Gaisley Volkswagen Wellington Marathon in late June, the Pride Parade, which is a week from Sunday, and then Anzac Parade in commemoration, which is on Anzac Day on 25th of April. These, as I mentioned, are all repeat events. We have had no objections to any of these events, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Do we have questions? I didn't really have any. I did actually have one small one. I noticed that for the marathon, the State Highway wasn't part of what we're approving, and I wondered if that's just because it doesn't need approval or whether it's going through a separate process with Waka
Correct, it'll be going through a separate process with Waka Kotahi.
Okay.
We're looking at local roads.
Okay,
yes.
that was just a minor question. I've got one from Councillor Randall, one from Councillor McNulty, and then Councillor Rogers.
Yes, thank you. Do these have traffic management plans associated with the road closures that have been approved?
They will have traffic management plans. Some of them are in various states of approval. They will all have traffic management plans approved before the events occur. Yes.
Thank you.
Just between now and Chair's briefing, when we talked about this last, you were yet to meet with the organisers of Pride. So in terms of security to stop the ilk of Tamaki, Brian Tamaki or his thugs, what are we doing to make sure that it's going to be a safe event and we're not going to see that kind of thuggishness on the streets of Wellington?
In terms of the traffic management plan itself, we're very focused on making sure that it's productive, safe event for all to attend. I do know that the event organisers are very focused on health and safety. They're working very closely with Wellington Police and also our events team and security from council.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Sorry, could I just add that several contingencies have been worked through in the traffic management plan based on various events occurring. So very confident that we should have a safe event.
Good to hear.
Yeah, I just had one person reach out about a previous road closure on some of these same roads about the movement of their vehicle, and I was wondering if you could just help me understand the process that leads to a vehicle being moved to enable these events.
So if an individual is wanting to move their vehicle, and given that some of these events do cover quite a large area, it's inevitable. Traffic management or traffic controllers from the traffic management companies will be available there and will help guide them through safely. Each of these events, as I say, has happened before. There's been various movements amongst each of these events in the past, and none of which have actually really caused much concern in terms of a safety.
Yeah, apologies. This one was a vehicle which was moved by us. So, like, it was a vehicle that was relocated to enable the event.
Yeah, so part of the traffic management plan is that if there's an area where parking must be removed, no parkers are put out, so essentially cones with event information on them. There's a letter drop as well, which informs of it. And then when it comes to the event, should a vehicle be parked there, the organisers will do their best to locate the owner and request that they look to move it. If that's unsuccessful, then they will actually make a tow. The tow is always the last step because it does come at a cost to the organisers, and they try and avoid that at all costs.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. That's just great to know.
Sean, my apologies if you covered this with your answer to Councillor McNulty or Councillor Rogers, but if people live on, say, Evans Bay Road with the Wellington Marathon, locals can still get in and out of their own properties with the help of the traffic.
They can. We do try and encourage them not to because, and part of the publicity around these events and the fact that they are quite reoccurring, most residents are very, very comfortable with that. There are always one or two that can't quite avoid that, but if that does happen and anybody does need to make a vehicle movement during that period of time, we really do encourage them to reach out to organisers, and they will make specific arrangements to actually help escort them through the site safely.
Okay, and they'll know the contact numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And if all else fails, then they can reach out to council and we can actually put them directly in touch with the organisers.
Okay. I assumed it works because we have had no objections and these have been run for a long time. So are there any other questions before I move the paper? Okay, thank you very much, Sean. Appreciate what you and other staff members do here. So I'm just going to very quickly move the paper. I'm very happy to move this paper. I think as our staff member has said, these have been taking place now for over a decade in some instances, and we have very, very seldom had any objections to any of these proposals. In this case, we have no objections to any of these events. I think that they provide a variety of experiences to our residents and visitors that we couldn't achieve without closing the roads to enable something a bit different. And I like the fact that there's actually a good selection of things happening from Anzac Day through to a new event, which is the road closure in, where is it? The street that the garage project is, thank you. And I'll look forward to seeing how that goes. It's always good to try new things too, as we have been doing with some of our events in Newtown, with small street closures. So I'm very supportive of this. Happy to move it. And do I have a seconder? I'll take Councillor Rogers. He put his hand up. Oh. Are you happy to defer to Councillor Calvert? We'll go for Councillor Calvert. Does the seconder want to speak?
I'll just endorse everything that you said, Chair, because I think it's very true. So happy
thank
to
you for that.
second.
Any other, or can we just move straight to a vote? We'll move straight to a vote. We'll have enough to say on some other papers, I'm sure. Okay, and that's passed unanimously. Thank you, everybody. And as I said, we will move to morning tea. We'll be back at about, I think we'll make it a short one, so back at about 10 to 12, 10 to 11 if you can. back onto it, please. So we are now up to the next paper. Item 2.2, which is sorry, I'm just catching up with myself a little bit. The Nuna Community Recreation Leases and Licenses. Yes, so I was going to ask Councillor Abdurrahman to move this. I'm not sure whether you are happy to or not, but before we do anything there, we need to get the officer up to introduce it. So, welcome. Welcome, Sarah. Yeah. Lovely.
Good morning. This report requests we approve a new licence for Hātepe Gardens on reserved land subject to public consultation, and approve a new premise lease for Conservation Volunteers New Zealand on reserved land subject to public consultation, and recommend to Council to approve a new lease for Calburn Croquet Club.
Okay, now I think we might have some questions.
Yeah.
So I think, was it Councillor Abdurrahman want to ask a question?
Kira, I do understand this is going out. It's a bit of a misunderstanding from some of the community members. They are not consulted when, in fact, what you're doing is to go out and consult.
Yes, we'll consult if approved.
So I wonder if we can just put it for a little bit, this one, until the community sorted out that confusions between themselves and the resident association and the community garden as well. And they've been doing a great job. And I think this is the community that they know each other. And I think it's not a good place to start it if we can put this paper to the next meeting and how that is.
I think if we go out to public consultation now, and then if there's any sustained objections, we can come back with those sustained objections and work through it that way.
Just clarify something, because looking at the actual wording of the motions, it's not it wasn't actually entirely clear to me that we still had a consultation process to go through with at least the first one, the community gardens one. So we could change the wording maybe to make that a lot clearer. Sure. And that might, how long would you, and what sort of consultation would you be thinking of doing, and what would the process be likely to be, should we approve this today?
If we approve today, we'll go to public consultation. We'll advertise in the Dominion Post on our website. We will work with neighbours and the local residents in that area to see if we can come to a compromise. If there's any sustained objections, then we bring the paper back to committee for further discussion.
Okay, so would it be appropriate to sort of add perhaps approve subject to community consultation process?
That's absolutely fine.
Okay, or some other wording?
Can I suggest an adjournment to just work?
Yeah, maybe we do need to think about that. Are there any other questions before we have the adjournment to discuss that thing? Because we've also got a premises lease for conservation volunteers. Is that also going to be subject to the same sort of consultation process?
Subject to public consultation.
Okay, whereas I can see that the third one, we're just recommending to council, so we're not making the final decision. Okay, we will just take an adjournment to discuss the wording and what we want to do.
I just want to get absolute clarification from what Brad said, is that this consultation is not a consultation to only consider this particular site, but to consider any site. Is that correct?
I'm happy to talk to that. We've already considered other sites prior to proposing this site. Out of the 3 sites we investigated, this was the preferred location for the gardeners. That's why we've proposed that one to council, to committee.
Okay, yes, I understand that, but if immediate adjoining neighbours consider that there are other sites that are better, then surely they should be heard before a consultation is actually done on this particular site. Is that correct?
The sites that they've suggested have been ruled out for various reasons, and this was their preferred location. That's why we've proposed that one to council, to committee. If there are sustained objections, we're happy to come back and have further discussions.
So what you're saying then, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the feedback from the Garden Society is actually stronger than from immediate neighbours?
No, it's because we haven't worked with the neighbours because we're requesting for public consultation. So once we work with them, we can try and mitigate their concerns and find a solution for both parties.
Okay, that's great, thanks.
So if there are no further questions, I plan to move this slightly amended set of motions. What we're now agreeing is to receive the information, this is if we do agree, to approve a public consultation process on the new licence for the Awhiro Bay Community Gardens, and to approve the licence for Conservation Volunteers New Zealand for 5 years with one further right of renewal. They are the existing tenants. That is still subject to public consultation, but it's basically, unless we have objections, it will be done. And then also recommending to the council to approve a new lease for the Kelburn Municipal Croquet Club Incorporated. And again, that will come with public consultation, as I understand it, and they are the existing tenants. So, do I have a seconder? I think Councillor Pauiwi Kelly has offered to second. Just to say that I'm happy now with what we're doing. Councillor Pauiwi Kelly, do you wish to speak as seconder or reserve your right?
No.
Okay.
No, but it might be helpful if you could put it up on the screen. Mayor Whānau has asked.
Okay. Is there any other debate? Councillor.
Yeah, for reasons I've outlined before, I won't be supporting 3. I understand the sentiment, but I think we need to do public consultation before we actually approve something, because that's just good consultation practices, let alone what might legally be required. I understand Councillor McNulty's frustration about these matters being raised, but that's part of why we have public participation and why we have debate around the table before we finalise a decision, because it's important that we listen to the people who do come and speak to us and take on board what they say, in addition to what might be in the formal papers. And so I think what this is showing is that we've listened to the public participants today and we've been able to help address some of their concerns. So I make no apology for not getting that sorted before now.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues, for the discussion on this. Just on point 3, I do think it is important that when we are going out to consultation, we have something to consult on. And in this instance, we are consulting on the lease. And it is very normal process for us in this committee to approve what we were consulting on if no one had any objections to it. So in that instance, I am fine with 3. I am grateful for the changes to clause 2, and that was it.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora whānau. I think in everything that we do, listening to the community and trying our best in mediating any issue they have should be as a priority for us. And I appreciate Elizabeth and Janet in representing the community and articulating what you're looking for the good work you have been doing, and it's sad you missed your previous premises. and we hope you will find, a better place in the near future. To Peter, thank you for coming and doing your submissions. I think here is where you need to do more of a work as well during consultation period with the community, working together. This is the community that's living already together, and you don't want to start from a place of a bit of uncomfortable. So you need to work together, and I'm very happy to involve it as your ward councillor as well. The resident association, they have engaged with us the last couple of days, and I'm hoping for a positive outcome where we all work together for the benefits of all. And thanks for the time you took in presenting today, and let's find a solution. And I'm very happy where we end up. And thanks to Sarah, the councillor Free, and the officers as well. I think we need to twinkle sometimes those things. And Councillor McNulty, yeah, I see your frustration. Sometimes we end up, so sorry I should have done a bit in advance, but
Pawiwi, thank you. Pawiwi Kelly, do you wish to speak? Okay.
No,
okay.
I agree with everything that's been said.
I would just quickly have a little right of reply. So I think there is a difference between a situation where we're renewing a lease for an existing tenant. That really is a simpler situation in many ways from when we are looking at a completely new use for a piece of public land. So I think we have made the right decision to put an extra step in this process for motion 2. On the other hand, I don't want to lose sight of the big picture here. There's actually potentially a good outcome here. So I think that it's possible to, for the gardens, people who want to design the garden, to design it in a way which can incorporate some of the concerns of neighbours, and that essentially it is a good thing that we're hopefully going to be able to provide for the community, which is an ongoing community garden, which, as we've heard, does provide a lot of benefits to a wide section of the community. So I liked what my colleague, Councillor Abdurrahman, said about working together, listening to what the concerns actually are, seeing if they can be addressed through the design of the garden, and hopefully that'll be a great resource for the community going forwards. I'm going to leave it there and suggest we vote. And I think we will take a division, if you don't mind.
If you can take 3 separately, please.
3 separately. So we'll do 1, 2, and 4. Thank you, and that's passed unanimously, and now we'll do 3. No, Councillor Abdurrahman? Oh, are you voting for or against? Okay, so that's passed with one person objecting. All right, thank you, everybody. We will move on. So we're now moving to item 2.3, which is the development contribution remission request. So I'd like to invite Steve and Mark. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Free. I'll just take the report as read, but just make a few comments before we hand over to any questions you might have. So, yeah, as mentioned in the executive summary here, October 18, AJ Holdings applied for building consent to construct a new warehouse for product storage and distribution in Naronga. It's assessed for development contributions for just around about the $34,000. In January 2024, Steve Grant, on behalf of AJ Holdings, applied for remission on the citywide roading portion of the development contributions, citing they believe the new warehouse will reduce the number of vehicle movements, and they're asking committee to consider their discretion to omit the applicant's development contributions. I note Stephen Twaite's conversation. I was observing that before when he spoke to us, and I think Councillor Rogers' question was quite relevant. It's new infrastructure, and that's what the development contributions is about addressing. When something new is built, there is an additional load on the system, and I suppose just to use an analogy, if Wellington City Council staff were to move out of this building into a brand new building, that brand new building that's constructed places an additional load on the infrastructure. Someone moves back into this building, there's an additional load, and the development contributions policy is there to address the additional cost for the additional load on the infrastructure that existing ratepayers have already paid for. So that would be my summary. The officer recommendation is to decline the request for remission of roading levies, but yeah, of course, through the chair, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and I do have a question. There was a significant revaluation of how much was owed, quite a bit, like almost cut in half. On what basis was that reduced?
It was on the water.
Okay.
Because it's a warehouse, they only put in a small toilet or small little bathroom, so it wasn't really fair to do it on the whole gross floor area because it's not a labour-intensive facility. So we did a special assessment on that.
Okay, and then the other one about the roading, would it be fair to say the assessment is done on what future tenants might make of it, or occupants might make of it, as well as just the person who's there at the beginning?
Yes, it's designed for the potential that warehouse has for generating further traffic in the network.
I see. So it's only of some relevance what the current purpose might be.
If you look at the current purpose, most of those trips are made on State Highway and Lower Hutt City Council roads, not the City Council roads. So it's actually pretty much neutral in terms of the local Wellington City Council roads.
I see. Okay, thank you. Councillor Abdurrahman.
My question is, if we decide today to give the rates remission, would that set premises, for future decisions? And can you also give me an example if previously reassessment was being made and then people paid according to reassessment?
Sure, I think Nicole and Steve can provide more detail of some of those examples, but certainly, yes, it would potentially create a precedent. These remissions do come to council. Usually, council have gone with the officer recommendation to not remit because it can create precedents. But of course, it's up to council to make a decision to assess each matter on its merits. But yeah, I suppose reflecting broadly the development contributions policy, which is about funding infrastructure, and it certainly doesn't do that in full. It only does that in part. Yeah, but whether there's further answer from Steve or Nicole.
It really comes back to the principle of growth, and by establishing a bigger warehouse on the site, it has the potential for growth. And even though the incumbent might not use that extra warehouse space in terms of generating extra trips on the road network, it's not to say that that couldn't generate future trips on the network, and that's what the assessment is made on. It's the highest and potential use of that site.
Okay, are there any other questions? I've actually, Pauiwi Kelly's actually offered to introduce this one. So over to you, Pauiwi Kelly.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. My view has always been about, that we follow our development contributions policy, and that if we waiver that, then we start to set a precedent, and then we start to get in. It starts to get a bit shady then, and I'm quite happy to support this. I take on board the comments that the officers have said about growth, and I also am happy to see that when this business came to the council, that the officers have reassessed what was available, and I think that what's been proposed is fair. So I'm happy for us. I'm happy to move this paper.
Lovely. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Calvert, you wish to speak?
Look, I'm very happy to support this. I understand where the developers' concerns is, but as officers have explained to us, this is a sort of blunt tool we have to help support growth in our infrastructure. It's not perfect, but it is what it is. And I think this council has in the past used the remissions in a way that we shouldn't be using them. And I think this is a company that's paying rates, which is great, yet in the past we have given a remission on development contributions to properties that aren't even rateable. So I think we've got to be really careful about how we apply any sort of remission without any basis of principles. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendations on this, and it's just one of those things I think we just have to deal with. If we want to fund growth in part, this is how we go about doing it.
Thank you. Any further debate, or shall we go to the vote? Puiwi Kelly, would you like a right of reply?
No.
Okay, let's go to the vote. Do we need anything separately? No? Okay. And that has passed unanimously, and we can invite Councillor Chung to rejoin us if he'd like to. In fact, we need him to, because he's got a role to play in the next paper. So I'd now like to move to item 2.4, the professional dog walker applications on Wellington Town Belt land. I'd like to welcome Denise to introduce the report. And thank you for joining us, to the journalism students who look like they're heading off now.
Kia ora, everybody. I'm going to take this paper as read, but I will provide a little bit of context as a way of introduction to the paper. This paper asks the committee to approve 5 new professional dog walking applications to undertake their activity on Wellington Town Belt land. The approval would be for a period of 2 years, and after that 2-year period, they would need to reapply. Professional dog walking is a pre-approved mobile activity in the Trading and Events in Public Places policy, which was adopted in July 2022. Currently, if you have an approved licence, you can already undertake professional dog walking on other reserve tracks in the city. It's just that we need to come up to council committee for extra approval for them to undertake their activity on Wellington Town Belt land. To obtain a licence, professional dog walkers are required to successfully pass the council's competency theory course and pack handling training assessment in order to obtain a licence and to operate. To date, we have not had any issues reported to us about professional dog walkers. Our assessment is that the consultation requirements under Section 16 of the Wellington Town Belt Act have been met as part of the pre-approval consultation in 2022. The public notification requirement of Section 18 of the Wellington Town Belt Act has been met through published information on our website listing the operators as pending approval for a licence. Do you have any further partai?
Are there any questions? Councillor Chung.
When you define a professional dog walker, are there any conditions on the number of dogs they can walk?
Unfortunately, Kate Bulgram, who's our animal team leader, is actually on leave today, so I don't have any specific questions in relating to the licence or the specific things around obtaining the pack handling assessment. But what I can do, Councillor Chung, is I can revert back to Kate and I can pass that information on and feed it back up.
I might be able to address that when I in debate. I think I do know. Yeah. Do we have any other questions? No. Councillor Chung, would you like to? Thank you very much, Denise. Very appreciated. We'll move now to having Councillor Chung move the paper and hopefully have a seconder.
Yes, I'd like to. I take great pleasure in moving the paper. I am a great fan of having dogs and ensuring that they are exercised correctly. I have great respect for professional dog walkers because, of course, I find that it really is a skill for them to go out and handle many dogs. Walking on the town belt, I think, is actually it's a really good place for dogs to go and acclimatise, where they're less likely to encounter other sort of issues, other distractions, such as cars and trucks and buses. And I know that my own dogs don't like particular number of buses, but. And I think that it's a very good activity, and it should be encouraged. So I'm very pleased to introduce this paper. Thank you.
And do we have a seconder? Must do. Councillor McNulty had his hand up just slightly. Do you need? Okay, we'll just move to general debate. So as I said, I think my understanding is the dog walkers undergo an assessment with one of our staff walking a certain number of dogs. And so if they're assessed as controlling 5 dogs, they're licensed to be able to control 5 dogs. So each dog walker probably has a different number of dogs that they aspire to take on any one outing, and that's what they get assessed against. So I am also very pleased to be voting for this. I think this policy, which we introduced a couple of years ago, has actually worked really well. I'm a little bit nervous about dogs I don't know, but I like them to be walked by professional dog handlers, because I do know that there has been some regulation there. And I also seem to observe that the dogs enjoy it a lot, that they actually like walking as a pack, and that it's clearly meeting a need in our community, because we've licensed 15 and we're now licensing or approving another 5. So, I think that there's nothing at the moment that would cause me any concern. In 2 years' time, in 2 years of operations, we appear to have had no complaints. So, I don't really see any reason why this isn't a good idea going forward. Is there any further debate? No. Very uncontentious. Does seconder want? No. Right of reply if you'd like, Councillor Chung?
No, let's go and vote.
Let's go and vote. And that's approved unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Right, so we're moving now to our biggest paper with the most information in it, and that's the traffic resolutions, item 2.5. Can I welcome to the table Kate and Sophie? Thank you.
Good morning. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce the traffic resolutions paper. We went out for consultation on 16 traffic resolutions, and we have 16 for your consideration today. These range from a variety of different restrictions, so safety improvements, we've got changes to time-limited parking, we've got more mobility parks, pick-up and drop-offs for schools, and also formalising a few existing restrictions. I do have a couple of other project managers and expertise to come and answer some questions on some of the papers if you have any, and so they'll come up and help with those. But yes, we're open to any questions that you have on any of the traffic resolutions today.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just 26-25, the Barnett Clyde Key one. I guess I was struggling to reconcile a bit what the public submitter was coming to us today with what's in paper about the overarching justification, because from what's in the paper, it is a complete net neutral transfer of car parking spaces from one area of the waterfront actually closer to where they are. So I'm just trying to understand what the concerns were and the justification for this TR.
Yep, definitely. I'll get Shane Binney, who is the waterfront manager, to come speak on this one.
Ben, just to clarify your concerns from the members of public or their submissions?
Was the submitter on behalf of the body corporate? It seemed like they were quite concerned around this resolution, and it seemed like having a lower level of service in terms of car parking access than they currently do with the status quo. But when you read the TR, it looks like we are really just moving pieces on the chessboard, but no net changes.
Correct. There is very small net change apart from one extra mobility car park being installed in Barnett Street, which does reduce total car parking by 1 because you need the extra space. But as you heard from the public oral submissions, this particular car park is not dedicated to service the apartments directly. They have, as you heard, over 70 underground car parks to service their apartments. Importantly, the council also provides public car parking. There's 12 public car parks surrounding their building, including loading zones, P120s, etc., and metered parking. And so, in my operations opinion, they are well catered and serviced in that area.
I have a question just around the enforcement, because there was also some stated concern that it wasn't being enforced particularly Do you have any comment to make on that?
There are difficulties operationally with the signage, and in particular signage on the being placed on the building, which we don't own. That's the body corporate. However, yes, as recently as yesterday, we came to an agreement that we would submit a new traffic resolution in the next round to provide free metered parking, which would reduce the requirement for pay machines, because there is a lot of difficulties and there's resistance from the body corp to attach anything to the building. So that's that's something that we've resolved, and it's very positive, and we have a good, as you heard, we have a good working relationship with the body corp, and that's hopefully going to minimise any issues and enable us to enforce the area.
Okay, thank you. And I've just reverting back to general questions, Kate, we did have a few, I just wonder if you could explain a little bit more about some of the objections. I think you might have mentioned to us that there are several that came from the same source.
Yes, that's correct. So we're the Barnett Clyde Street and also the Kent and Marjorie Bank Street TR, they went out for consultation with the November RPC TRs, but they were put on hold, so they were done earlier, and during that round we had a number of no's, I guess you could say, but they were just standard across the board commenting on all of the traffic resolutions. So there was about 8 of those at the time, and again with the other 14 traffic resolutions that went out more recently for consultation, we had 4 submitters also comment on majority of, well, all of the TRs, and as a collective, just with the same kind of response. They just didn't want us to do any changes. So that's a good point to kind of take into account as well.
So that would mean that it might look like there is a bit more opposition.
Yes, yeah.
But it's coming from a sort of the same sources across a variety.
Yeah, it's just more that they don't want us to do any kind of changes to anything. It's not necessarily specific to that traffic resolution.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Councillor Abdurrahman?
TR 1925, the one by Marjorie Bank and Kent Terrace. I wonder how that one can practically be voted on today when it was consulted before the decision for the LTP, and the LTP amendment decision has made a lot of change. So how something that being consulted before the decision can be voted for implementation?
I might get Amy Hobbs to come up and speak regarding this one.
Yeah,
Kia ora, can you hear me okay? So this is part of the Golden Mile project, what we call enabling works, and it was publicly consulted on last year before the Hātepe amendment. It was supposed to go to I believe the November Regs Committee. It was pulled at the 11th hour just because it wasn't responsible to put it through when the Hātepe amendments and deliberations were going ahead. I guess now we're in a position we've been told to progress, so we're putting it back on the table at today's Regs Committee. I guess for the approval. Do you want me to talk to some of the submissions, or?
Well, my question was actually if the consultation was made before the amendment, and once the amendment was made, now we're making a decision on something that was consulted before the LTP amendment.
We've got Brad.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Councillor, with regards to that, from the time we consulted, if the project scope or if the LTP amendment had resulted in changes to the project, then correct, we would probably need to reconsult. Because there's been no change to the actual project, the consultation that we did at the end of last year still holds true because the project didn't change. The only reason for us not to bring it was because there was questions around the project continuing, and so we felt it wouldn't have been responsible for us to bring it to council and to this committee until we had certainty about whether the project was going to go ahead or not.
Just to follow on that one, that case, if at the time people wanted to come participating in public participation time, have they got an opportunity to be reached out under the new 1925 so they can have a feedback into it coming to the public participation?
Correct, Council. So as with all traffic resolutions, any submitted to a traffic resolution is then invited to attend the council meeting to provide oral submissions. The same was done for this traffic resolution.
Back then, or for this new one, for the one that we are having today?
It isn't new, is my understanding.
Yes, it's new in a way, because if they were invited back then in November and the meeting was postponed, but now the meeting is today, were they invited to today's meeting is my question.
Yes, yeah. So we went and advised all original submitters on this traffic resolution that we were taking it now to the February, and we gave them that option as well with all the information if they would like to come and speak today. So they were notified.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No, thank you very, very much. There's a lot of work here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I've invited Councillor McNulty, or he's offered, or whatever, he's going to move it.
Yeah, look, happy to move these today. Yeah, in questions it was just raised that there were some public submitters that have gone through every single traffic resolution here and said no, 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 no. But it's worth noting, and I'll talk to the two in Tawa because myself and Councillor Randall have been particularly close to those two. Those are requests that have come out of the Tawa business group. They're about making the Tawa business and shopping area more amenable and more accessible to those businesses. So a lot of what we see in here is actually from the ground up, and it's, you know, often with a very pro-commercial slant. So it's a pity that some of those submitters might not have taken the time to actually see where some of the genesis for these things come from, and that it's not just council trying to make life harder for people. Usually, I think pretty much everyone in here has come up from some kind of genuine need, and you can have a debate about whether the validity of some of the needs is as much as with other resolutions, but overall it's important that these are generally community-initiated traffic resolutions and not the other way around, and to convey that. So thanks to the officers for the work that they do. I know this always builds up a lot, and we will, yeah, I'm happy to move today.
Do we have a seconder? I'm happy to second it for Councillor Rogers. Do you want a second? Why not? Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I can speak. Yeah, I just wanted to speak briefly to the traffic resolution, which was the changes around the waterfront parking, which we received a number of submissions on. And yeah, I want to thank the people for taking the time to engage in the process of making a submission. But in my analysis of the claims that they had made, I did not feel that in the arguments they had weighted the fact that they did have private parking available in their building in their analysis of those parking changes. As Councillor McNulty talked about in the questions, the net change across the waterfront is not substantial, and as we heard from officers, it is actually a resolution to increase it by 1 mobility parking space, which I'm glad that they were able to support. But in terms of what do we want the waterfront to be, I can understand that people live there and those people do have private car parking spaces already, and ultimately it's about increasing access to the waterfront. So I do think that the team has made a good compromise around the marina and also members of the public who are coming to visit, with the restrictions only between 6 and 10 a.m. So I am happy with where it's sitting and the decisions the officers have made.
I was going to speak now, but I have seen that Councillor Randall is on the list. I think this is the bread and butter of our committee, and we actually should be extremely proud of what we do and what our staff do in this space. If anyone ever says council was not responsive to residents, I think they just need to look at the list of traffic resolutions that we do just about every meeting and see that there are responses for school drop-off zones, responses to safety with dotted yellow lines, responses sometimes to the regional council lengthening bus stops, responses to business putting in loading bays, responses to mobility parking. And in some cases, formalising existing parking so we actually can enforce it, which is another point that's been made today. We need to be able to enforce these changes that we're putting in that have been made previously and don't actually match with reality particularly well. So I am extremely grateful to our hardworking staff in this area. I think actually all of Wellington should be very grateful. It doesn't look like the sexy sort of stunning stuff, but it's what makes people's day-to-day lives actually workable. And I don't have anything here that stands out as we shouldn't support it. I think it's all good stuff. If you take into account the fact that some people have just put blow nose to quite a few of them, actually there's a lot of support for all of these. Right, Councillor Randall, over to you.
I just really wanted to say the same sort of thing, but particularly as a Northern Ward councillor, I also wanted to thank the officers for working well with the local residents. Sometimes people forget that 80% of the time this council was business as usual and doing it pretty well. And I think I did want to take the time, even though Councillor Free and McNulty have done the same thing, to thank officers for the day-to-day work. Often in the political world, you get focused on where the differences are, but that's really only 20% of what we're doing. So, yeah, and like I say, from a ward council perspective, the stuff that happened in Tawa just worked really well, and now it's here. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, well, we're on a roll. Let's go and vote. Oh, any right of reply? Okay. Anything needing to be taken separately? Let's go for it. Okay, unanimous, lovely. Testament to the hard work. Right, we're moving now to the last item, which is actually our forward program and decision. What do we call that? The forward program and decisions register. So, I would like to invite, I think it's you, Brad, isn't it, for this one? Decision register updates and upcoming reports.
Councillor, so in front of you is the decision register, the upcoming reports and forward work program. I will take it as read. Happy to take any questions. And I do know that Councillor Calvert has a move that she wants to make on this.
I actually do have a question, and that's that decision register is a little bit, it's very much an overview. You know, so many have been actioned and so many haven't. I have seen in the past a little bit more information about what's actually still pending. And I'm wondering, I know it's a bit of extra work, but I think it is quite helpful for us to track what we're doing with a tiny bit more information. Is that possible?
Yeah, I can take that. I can take that on board and feed that back to the team. A lot of the actions that are outstanding here are from the traffic resolution process, and it's just generally when traffic resolutions can't be implemented on site for various reasons, like there's another project happening on site at the moment and we've got to wait for that project to finish. But yeah, we can start including more of that detail.
I think just a little bit of an overview is useful, because we then maybe pick up on things that, for whatever reason, are not progressing. That's my question. Any other questions? No? Right, well, thank you, Brad, as usual. I'm going to move this, I think. I know you've got an amendment, Councillor Calvert. I was going to second the amendment. Does anyone want to move this? Okay, thank you.
Nothing to say. Just need a seconder and then we can go to amendments.
For this. Thank you, Councillor Chung. Right, now, I believe we do have an amendment, Councillor Calvert.
Have we got it up on the screen? Yeah.
And we can have an opportunity to ask questions of the amendment if people would like. Oh, okay, Councillor Pauiwi Kelly has her hand up. But let's give everyone just a minute to read it.
Alicia, I think.
Yeah, I'm just fixing the numbering and it's just coming up. We can still discuss it.
Okay, it's quite specific, isn't it? We might take an adjournment, because I wonder if there's a little bit of discussion so that we can get a little bit more support. It hasn't been seconded yet.
I haven't moved it yet either.
Okay. Okay, so the process is going to be, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. And I think Councillor Pauiwi Kelly has her hand up. We'll then go to the mover. We'll then see if there's a little bit of anything that needs to be suggested or whatever. And then it will be seconded, and then we'll have debate, and then it will be voted on. So, do we have questions? Councillor McNulty.
Pauiwi was ahead of me.
Oh, okay.
And
Sorry,
actually, I
you're
think
right.
the Deputy Mayor might have been too.
Yep, and Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. My question was really about the amendment that I had circulated this morning, and just to update the committee that I've been asked to push it out to the next hui, so that's why it's not going to happen today.
Thank you for that, Pauiwi Kelly. I think that probably is a wise move, because we haven't really had time to digest it. And also I feel that we've got a lot on our plate already, so that is appreciated. Now, next up was Councillor McNulty.
Okay. Yeah, I guess to officers, how is the Karori Connections going as far as a cycleway network?
I have both Liam and Claire here who could probably answer that.
So Karori Connections finished installation about 2 weeks ago, so it's extremely early days for the end of that route. We are just at the moment analysing the count data that we've got, which, if you want, in the next 5 minutes I can get some initial things, but they're currently not published on the website because there's been a number of issues with them over the last little while, which means they need to be validated, which is what we've been doing so that they're accurate. We're also transitioning to this new system of the Viva City, so I won't bore you with the counter story, and I can pass that information on later, but I can, if you want, in the next couple of minutes, just get some very early data from the last month. It's only been finished 2 weeks.
Yeah, I guess the data would be good, but I would actually quite like to be bored by the story because we haven't had data since June on the transport projects in our city.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I think the intention, I was talking to officers this morning, I was listening to comments from councillors, is to provide that story. It might be because it is since pre-COVID times, 10 years prior, we've been doing cordon counts, but as we've been maturing our technology, we've also used other systems. And so there is a story about us tracking the usage of our road network through all types of modes. And I think that will be good context, when we bring that back in April, based on this resolution, if it gets approved, for you to make your decision.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question? Okay. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, I'm just aware that a survey's gone out, and I guess if we make these changes, what will that do to the adjusted to the survey and the work that we're trying to do at the moment?
Through you, Madam Chair. So that's correct. I mean, effectively, the survey won't be particularly useful, will it? Because we wouldn't have had a full calendar year of measurements through the seasons about the usage, and based on March, probably unable to also do a comparison to the earlier cordon counts along there. So, but we can provide that advice if this is successful when we report back.
Okay, and so then I guess the next question is, do officers have advice on anything in this amendment that, what is officers' advice on the amendment? What are the impacts?
Well, the impacts are that we go away and do some work to give some options. There have been quite specific asks on this resolution for us to look into, but I also note that there's a request for any other solutions to support shared spaces for all users. Now, I think what is helpful if councils understand that we'll provide back not just the options here listed, but also other options. That's how I'm interpreting that third point. That work, I understand, it can be done by the 9th of April. My manager, Vida Christella, has been providing some advice back to the councillor regarding this direction.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask a question, and it is quite specific, and I think in some ways the numbering of the way it's been numbered by our DEM services staff has perhaps even tightened it down to be more specific than it was. But I'm hearing from you, and this is the question, I'm hearing from you that you have a general understanding of what we're asking, and you're...
Yes, I think...
And that's not going to tie you completely in knots.
No, it's not, because I think, as I said, Vida has done some work with Councillor Calvert earlier. She has got an outstanding request about perhaps being more specific around Glenmore Street, but I'm taking that from the start of the gardens to the end of the gardens in what is adjacent to Glenmore, not the whole Glenmore Street.
No, and in fact, I think we did actually clarify that it's from the garden entrance. We could actually add that in. It came with the latest one.
Did it? Okay.
It was from the main garden entrance up to the
not from
Garden Road.
Yeah.
No, to Garden Road. So it's a fairly contained stretch, and so we can actually add that in.
We probably should then.
Because Vida was asking that we did that.
Can I just add to that we should just give some flexibility, because officers may want to bring back something a bit less or a bit more, with just understanding where the road is and and how they develop the TR. So I just think if we've got to allow some flexibility for the best solution to come forward. So I don't want to just say this little. You've got the basis of this is alongside the Botanic Gardens. But you may want to cut it off a bit before, you may want to extend it a bit more. I don't know.
Well, you could just put approximately. But I think she was wanting to ensure... sorry, we probably should take a break if we're in discussion. We'll take a short break from our process, if you don't mind. she wasn't, she
Okay. From my observation of Glenmore Street, it seems to me that at the lower part of Glenmore Street from...
It's questions at the moment.
Okay, so my question is that I think there are different characteristics of Glenmore Street, and at the bottom of Glenmore Street, it seems as if it's easier for people to sort of to transit along there. But when you get up to the top of Glenmore Street, is it more dangerous? Would you consider it more dangerous because you're approaching a turn there, and so it's more important to actually have a wider road because the cars, as they approach the corner at the top of Glenmore Street to turn right, is that more dangerous because the cars are actually turning and maybe getting close to the centre line?
Okay, so is that if you're a cyclist or a car driver?
Well, both cars and bikes.
I'll let Claire make a comment.
They're two different situations. So up near the corner at the end, the width there is needed because the buses have a wide swing turn. So that's why we need the space there. Further down outside the gardens, the road is much more constrained. And so that's where We don't, when you have parking on the left-hand side, they're effectively sharing the uphill lane with traffic. So that was why we needed that space on the left. So they're slightly different reasons that they need space. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's hard to kind of compare which one's more dangerous than the other because they have different factors compounding them.
Councillor McNulty and then Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, so before, sorry, I was actually asking what has required the data validation about existing machines, like the boring detail? Why has it been that we haven't been able to put that data up?
So there's different reasons for different counters. One of the things that happened on Glenmore Street is that the counter was in the middle of the road previously, and where parked cars were, obviously people couldn't ride. And so as the cycleway was made, the counter moved over to the space on the cycleway where there were previously parked cars where nobody could roll over it. So that skewed what the data looks like for Glenmore Street. So we need to now validate that counter, our new Viva City, which is the video sensor, to get an accurate picture of what's happened with Glenmore Street across the two different data sources. And there's a range of those happening around the city as we transition to this new technology. So we don't want to be publishing that data, which we are closing down and moving to the new Viva City. We want to analyse all the sets we've got to make a before and after accurate statement, and then move to Viva City, which is what will get published online later in the year.
I guess I'm just going back to my marketing analysis days a bit there. If you have a flawed data set, but you're collecting it continuously, even with flaws, but we're going to now do validation for months from July onwards, but we weren't doing those validation checks before June, is that what you're saying? So essentially, we've got two different methodologies in a sense that's going to be in a full data set. Is that the end?
We've got two different methodologies, and we need to now, like the census had to do last year, triangulate the data sets so that we can make some sensible, accurate statements about the change. And that takes quite a specialist skill. And if we just put the data up as it is, raw, it's misleading and misrepresentative because there's too much to context for people to understand. So that's why we're trying to do that analysis right now, to put in the accurate data up without having people be confused about the two different data sets.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers, then Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that the full cycleway had only been installed for 2 weeks, and we consistently hear that it's important to have a connected network. So I'm just wondering, how easy is it for us to be able to make good decisions with only data of, I guess, 6 or 7 weeks of a full cycleway?
Yeah, I mean, uptake doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't really start happening until you have the connectivity, which we've only really got now to Karori. So, you know, I think it is too early to be expecting numbers to be suddenly skyrocketing. We're starting to see on some of like Nio, I just got before, between Jan 23 and Jan 25, we've seen a 30% increase in the data for that kaiwharawhara counter, and that's after 2 years. So we do expect uptake to happen once people have had a chance to know it's finished and start considering their travel habits. It never happens overnight. Yeah.
And just with some of the options that have been presented for you to investigate by the mover, have any of these been considered formally or informally by the organisation before?
So some of them have. So the one around sharing the footpath we looked at through our multi-criteria analysis, and we can use some of that information in our report. We didn't look at a clearway at the time. That was excluded from the long list because it didn't include physical separation, and so we had made a note in our long list that we weren't including those options, but we can include that here. We did also look at the option of going through the gardens, and that's one that we can bring up. There are legal issues at the moment, but we can report on that, and we can include some of that information in the report. Yep.
Just one more if I can. And just from the wording that's in front of you at the moment, in the investigation of the reinstatement of parking and those aspects of it, would you be analysing, I guess, the visitation of all people to the Botanic Gardens, whether it's by foot, by bike and by car, or would you just be looking at the impact that it's had on people by private vehicle?
So separate to this, prior to this, we were coming at April the 9th with a report back on the impacts of visitation to the gardens. So I'm we can include that into this report. And from that, we've done 2. We're about to do a 3rd visitation surveys at the gardens, looking at how people are getting there. So we'll report back that information as part of this report as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Now, next up was Councillor Calvert. I'll put you on the list.
Given with the changes on obviously new technology with measuring counts, what plans has the council got to get an independent assurance that we are doing it in the best possible way?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that. We have a City Insights team that is responsible for the Viva City and producing the new dashboard, and they work with our data team. I don't think there is. I think it is an internal exercise, Liam.
No, are you suggesting we go external to get the data?
Well, I just want to know if there's a sort of, a second check, because obviously when you're when the team's ingrained in doing the work, you look at it from a particular perspective. So I want to understand: is there, statistics is a professional subject, and whether we've got any.
I would say that the team that are doing Viva, they are the data professionals. It's the City Insights. But I hear what you're saying, and maybe Liam and I can.
Also, I think Brad has something to say.
Yeah, so I through your chair. So from a data perspective, because there have been a few questions on data, I think the council has progressively, coming back to Liam's point, has progressively improved our collection of data as we've gone over the years. And like Liam mentioned, prior to COVID, we were doing manual counts with people standing on the side of the road, taking counts of who came past. We've progressed quite a bit since then, and the Viva City data that Claire's talking about now is the latest iteration of the way that we count. And we don't just use it to count cyclists, we use it to count pedestrians, we use it to count cars, we use it to count freight, buses, everything. And it gives us a really granular, deep data set to work with. The collection of that data actually is done externally. So it's done via sensors. It is then processed externally and then captured into a database that the council owns. So that database can then be mined by council, various different teams within council, to produce whatever sort of data sets that they need for their work. Cycleways and cycling is one of the teams that could be using that data set, but isn't the only team to use that data set. So from an independent data collection perspective, yes, that is done independently. The validation that Claire's been talking about is we've been using different data collection methodologies up until this point, and we need to validate that those data collection methodologies also match up with the new collection methodology that we're moving to with Viva City.
So I suppose it's not just about collection, it's about in the interpretation of that data and the analysis of that data, because as we all know, this simple pyramid, it's data leads to information, leads to knowledge. So I'm really interested to understand, aside, so thank you for the independent collection of data, I'm interested to understand how we, is there a critique of our, how we analyse that information?
Yes, and so our City Insights team is independent. It sits in Shauna Dane's space and looks at City Insights and what we can tell across the city that's happening from, where pedestrians are dwelling, how people are using the city and how the city is actually moving. And so they're currently the team that's been looking at the different use cases for this data. But yeah, to come to what I think you're asking for, Councillor Calvert, is have we had an independent look at that analysis with its independent eye? No, but it's something we can take on board and have a look at whether we can do something like that.
Yeah, because I know we've got a research and evaluation team. So does that sit under Sean or Dane, or is that a different team?
It's a different team, but they work quite closely together.
Okay, thank you.
So
I've got one more question.
Okay. Can I come back to you, because I've got quite a few. Can I just clarify that most of what you were talking about, Brad, was to do with the week, the cordon count that we do in the week of March? Is that what you were talking about? Because I think there's a lot of ways in which we're collecting data, and I think what you might have been talking about is a very specific.
Yeah,
week.
so we used to do cordon counts, which was 1 week a year where we'd count in very specific locations across the city. And then we started shifting towards using actual counters and combining that with the traffic counting via the cables across the road. And now we're shifting everything over into the Viva City counting, which is one port of call that can count everything.
And so that includes the cycle counters that we've had on individual routes. So we're not using those anymore. We're going to...
Just to be clear, though, we are doing, Brad, one more cordon count in March for all the entrances, just to close out that data set. Yeah.
Okay.
So all of these counting methodologies, like Liam has mentioned, have not ended. So we still do cordon counts. We still have the bike counters running. What we are doing is transitioning to this new counting methodology. And until we are 100%, which we're getting really close with, validating that counting methodology to make sure that the data sets match up and that we haven't missed something by shifting over to a new technology, it's not responsible for us to publish any of that data just yet.
Okay. Right, I still have some people on the list. So I was up to Councillor Chung and then back to Councillor McNulty and then back to Councillor Calvert.
Great, thanks very much. I'm a very strong supporter of using data to actually make decisions, but I think that what data doesn't tell us...
question, please, Councillor
Yeah, okay,
Chung.
what data doesn't tell us is that what's excluded. Now, I want to know when you have functions like last weekend, there was a Lantern Festival on at Botanic Gardens, and many people called up and said that, look, they tried to get in there, what happened, what was it like, did you enjoy it? Because they went by and they couldn't find any close parking spots, and so they didn't stay there. So they just went around and went home again. So how do we actually analyse the difference in people going to these festivals and not going to them because they couldn't find parking places?
Prior to us moving on to the Viva City sensors, we wouldn't have been able to do that. We wouldn't have had a methodology to be able to get that sort of data and analyze that sort of data. One of the reasons we've moved onto these sensors, which have AI technology built into them that can learn as we ask more questions of it, was for that sort of information so that we can start collecting data like that. We're not quite there yet, but that's where we're headed towards.
I think we need to keep moving. So we've got, I'm up to Councillor McNulty. I've put Councillor Abdurrahman on the list after Councillor Calvert. And Councillor Randall, did you have your hand up? Yes. And then we will draw a line up to that point.
Yeah.
Councillor McNulty.
First one, are we going to open source the Viva City data like we do the decision register?
Correct. At some point we will, yeah.
So then this just goes back to what you've just said in answer to Councillor Chung's question. We talking about diminished attendance at Gardens Magic from previous years. Weather was cited, I think, as the main factor. Did we have any data outside of that to validate that was the primary driver?
Are you talking specifically about Gardens Magic?
Yep.
Uncertain. I'll have to touch base with the parks and events teams and come back to you on that one.
Okay. Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, so just getting back to the data, so if we weren't sure of the data sort of from about June, why did, the council and even the mayor has put out media releases about the increase in usage of cycling, and I just wondered how we've been able to say that when we had concerns about the data.
So I think Liam actually had an answer for Ben's previous question, and maybe you can answer
just to
this
the
one as
question.
well.
I'll just circulate, I think it's the last 5 years data for Garden Magic. You can see of course there was a weather impact last time, but the numbers are actually still very healthy. The second question is because in some of our routes we are more confident with the data. And so the releases we've been most notably from memory out in the media about was the Kenton-Cambridge counts as well, and maybe the NIO, but I'll let...
I think possibly some of the east ones too.
Just to come back, can I come back to the gardens? No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, about the project level counts.
Well, I don't know about project, but if we've had concerns about our data collection since June, or we became aware of it around then, we've had media releases going out saying, look, we've had increase in usage. And so how could we say that if we had concerns about our data?
So we have been doing analysis at the project route level. So there are 2 reports out, the Newtown and the Botanics, where those numbers are in the public sphere. But we made a decision last July, I was actually away during this time, to take those counters down because we had a number of issues that we needed to go away and figure out. And we didn't, so there are some counters like the Kaiwharawhara one where actually we're feeling confident about it, but we didn't want to, we've been having to do all this validation and it hasn't been finished yet. We're also really wary that we are sunsetting that technology. It is not the quality that we want, and we want to move on to the Viva City, which is the much higher quality data. So we're actually going to be moving away from publishing those numbers. But we will be producing a report of the project level before and after counts. We just haven't finished that analysis yet. And for some of the routes, we've only just finished them. It's too early to be doing that kind of reporting.
Okay, Councillor Abdurrahman.
It was already asked, but I just want to frame it in this way. Could you please confirm if the data you've been collecting have been used for the report and now you find out that is a flaw, does that mean we've been making some decisions based on...
Yeah, I get what you mean. No, so I guess what I'm trying to say is when it is open source to the public, it needs that specialist analysis that can understand how to unpick, for instance, when the cycle counter was moved from the road into the cycleway, and we need to understand that context and analyse it in that context. And so that's what we feel like hasn't been able to be publicly available while we do that analysis. That doesn't mean all of the data is wrong or that the counters are all broken. It just means we need to take time to make sure that the reports that we claim are actually accurate. And just by publishing that data live, it's misleading and it's misrepresenting what's happened.
I think, Madam Chair, I might just bring Claire back to the initial questions from Councillor Calvert and Councillor Nuridan. I think what they're saying is the 2 pieces of published work that are currently on our website are thorough and have data that is valid, and they've had that analysis done. Claire's just talking more generally about the network.
My question is, we've been getting data previously for different projects. The problem, when you find out in July or before that, was based on only some of the counters or the counting methodology or the counter you've been using itself was the problem in general, or only some of them?
Yeah.
Only some of them have had these issues around moving, but the 2 reports that we have written and published have gone through that analysis. And
I get that.
Yeah.
So if the problem was only few of them, why are you not changing those few instead of changing the whole system? My understanding is the whole system must have got...
I think we've had the answer to that, and there is better technology now.
So the previous one was not right one?
No, so perhaps I'll come in there, Madam Chair. So because we have moved to a new technology, we have a data collection methodology that we were using that was reliable and accurate. Us moving on to a new technology, we need to validate the new technology. What we're not saying is that our data was wrong. What we're saying is before we start publishing new technology data, we need to validate that that data has been collected accurately, and that's the validation process that we've been going through.
Okay. I'm not sure we're going to get any more information than we've already had with more questions on this. But Councillor Randall, what was your question? We'll move to you, and then I think we do need to keep going.
I've got a couple of questions, but first question is around the whole length of the Karori Cycleway. Is the Karori Cycleway 100% physically separated? So some other parts of the Karori Cycleway are not physically separated?
It wasn't the width.
It wasn't the width. Okay, so, but a clearway on Glenmore Street wasn't considered because...
Speed differential, I suspect, Councillor. So the 30k zone within the villages, for example, they're not separated, but the speed environment's a lot lower.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. I guess the question around the counter data, why did you move them? Why were the counters moved? Because, like, it seems to have disrupted the delivery of data. So, why didn't you just leave them where they were? Because obviously we have now gone to sort of lost everything, got no data, even if they moved to make the data better. Couldn't we not have two counters and the old one could then do, because like this transfer seems to have totally disrupted all the feed. We've got no continuity and we've got a black hole at a time when we're actually doing decisions.
The before counter for Glenmore couldn't be on the left side of the road because there were previously parked cars. We didn't want to keep the counter in the road when we built the cycleway because all the people and the bikes are now in the cycleway. So it didn't make sense to have it in the same place. We do have a camera now, a Viva City, that allows us to count for Glenmore, and that moving forward is how we're tracking the numbers for Glenmore.
Yeah.
I think we have had the answers. Honestly, I really think we've had the answers for this.
So there was a recent, in terms of using data, there's a recent story where council released cycling uptake on Cambridge Terrace. Now, I didn't even know we had a counter on Cambridge Terrace, but then apparently the council was quite happy with the data to say that the cycling had increased 74% on the Cambridge Terrace cycleway. So is that data validated, and if it was, if it was not validated, then why was it put in a story or what?
Yeah, I don't have the details for that now. I think the numbers in the report for the new town to the city are the ones that I know that have been through that analysis, but I can't speak to that one
Okay.
right now.
I think we have had a lot of discussion and answers, and, fairly good answers, fairly good questions, fairly good answers. So I'm going to move on. Now, I think we need to get back to our... yeah, exactly. We seem to go under a very deep analysis of data. But anyway, I'm going to hand back to you, Councillor Calvert.
Okay, thank you. Look, as we know, we've... as our roles as elected representatives, we're here to take on board feedback, and I will say, as being a local ward councillor from the Botanic to Karori cycleway connections, generally this thing's gone in. Some people haven't been happy with things, others have been happy with it, but there has been two real pinch points, and at either end of the connections, and that's at the Botanic Gardens end and at the far end round by Karori Park. And I appreciate the officers are saying, well, it's only just gone in, but I think what we're seeing is that the issues that were raised by the public early on have come to fruition, and what we were said at the time, well, we'll put them in and we'll see, and we can quickly make changes because these are just transitional cycleways. And I think what we've got to remember is I appreciate this extra work on the council, but the council is paid to do this work. When you're impacting on the amenity and how people move around their places, that we have to take that into consideration. We've heard about earlier on, not on this stretch, but from businesses in Nio, of how their livelihoods are actually being really impacted now. And if we take 6 or 12 months to review something, when we know something inherently is not working, and also our own data collection is not clear. And I know officers are working hard to improve that data collection, but nevertheless, for instance, in Nio, we made some further changes without being assured about the data collection. So look, these amendments are really asking our officers to go away, come back to the next regulatory processes meeting, tell us what we can do from a governance perspective and how we can make some changes to just balance out some of these aspects a bit further. We've given some suggestions. We know there might be others. We've looked at, potentially there might be a shared pathway. There's a similar shared pathway up at the start of Karori Road that's been put in. And we also know around the Karori Park area there are opportunities there as well to reimagine how that might work with a balanced use. So look, I'm asking for your support. And I think this is also really, if we do this work, we're showing to people that we represent that we are listening to them, and we will react quickly. We can adapt quickly when the needs arises. So look, I ask for your support, and I understand, Councillor Free, you're seconding.
Yes, so I'm seconding, but I don't need to speak right now. So I've got Councillor Abdurrahman, Councillor Randall, Mayor Whānau on the list, and I'm happy to put anyone else on. Oh, you don't want to speak anymore? Great. Councillor Randall. No? Councillor Randall? No? Okay. Okay, Mayor Whānau, and I'll add Councillor McNulty and Deputy Mayor Foon. Over to you, Mayor Whānau.
Oh, can you hear me?
We
can. You hear me? Wonderful. Look, it's probably not surprising. I'm not going to support this. I think a lot of work and compromise has already gone into the Korori Connections design. So our cycle team are already listening, and they'll continue listening by collecting the data. And look, it's only been a matter of weeks. These things take time. It takes time for people to adjust. And I think very open to getting more data and considering improvements later on, but I think it's too soon. And by putting quite specific suggestions like a clear way, up today and pushing against design that have already been agreed, I think we risk ending up in a design by committee, an island-based situation where we're confusing people and relitigating and creating a much bigger mess. And I just want to remind councillors to just, let's look at the bigger picture here. So we've already made decisions already as a council to create a full cycleway network to ensure that we're creating, a safe transport pathways for everyone, and a safe cycleway for everyone, including children, so that they can get across the city. I'll also remind people we have over 33,000 car parks across the city. Sure, they might not be exactly where someone wants it, but this is where the world is going now. We're in a climate crisis. This will help lower emissions. We're in a cost of living crisis. Cycleways are the cheapest way to get around. And I think we also continue to unfairly blame cycleways when our whole country is in a general economic downturn, and public service cuts as well have been a big part of our problems. So, look, I'll always, say we have to create travel options for everyone, not removing a safe and wanted option for cyclists to create more convenience for drivers. And yes, people are going to get frustrated. This takes time. People will adjust. I also think from a process perspective, we've given our officers a pretty unfair interrogation on an item that's essentially an administration paper. So I really feel for them, and I thank you for being available for the questions. So because of that, let's just wait for the reporting and we can have a more robust discussion later down the track. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Whānau. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, if today was a theme park, I guess we'd call it Anecdotapalooza, because today's discussion is going to be entirely anecdotal, and it's entirely anecdotal in the complete absence of any data to tell us how the Korori Connections project is going. Most of it has been installed for much more than weeks. There's only been a small part at the end that's come through. And I guess I'm still a bit confused that if a previous data collection methodology was valid, why we wouldn't keep collecting that whilst also then validating a new database, but I could spend a long time on that discussion. Patrick Morgan made the call this morning, policy consistency is really important, and I agree, it's great. And then it meets the real world, and the real world is complicated and messy, and sometimes you've got to be a little bit more responsive. I know at this council there's a bit of a school of thought in the wider council, not so much this committee, that once our decisions are made, they're to be done, locked away forever, and never be reviewed. And I vehemently reject that philosophy of governance. We're living in a time where progress can be undone, and it can be undone incredibly quickly, and we've seen just down the road how quickly so many good pieces of progress have been undone, how we're having really sensible speed limit changes reversed. And that's what happens in terms of the knee-jerk reaction to politics. So responsiveness, I think, on council is actually quite important. I know there's a spectrum of transport views in the community and probably even in the council, from the very word cycleway, being offensive, the existence of a cycleway being offensive. But on the other end, it seems like the existence of a cycleway in itself is success enough. It doesn't matter for utilisation or the impacts, just having a cycleway is successful, and I don't think either of those approaches are fair or valid. We do need to know that when we're doing transport projects, that they're working, and if they're not working, we need to adjust. And council can make mistakes even when doing good things, like rolling out the cycleway network, which I fundamentally believe is a good thing, and I've supported every cycleway project that's come around to this committee. But we need to continuously review the performance of our transport changes, and that has been incredibly difficult to achieve in this council. So in the absence of any data, my anecdotals, the last few months in my ward, I have basically probed anyone I've spoken with around their feedback on Glenmore Street. And I'm not hyperbolising here, 0 people, Johnsonville through to Tawa, have said, yeah, what you've done has been good. Now, this is anecdotal, right? This is, again, the problem about making decisions on just based on reckons and not having numbers in front of us. But that is pretty confronting when I can't find a person, one person to come back to me in my ward. And these are, people, this is not just, your stereotypical anti-cycleway type of voter. These are families with young children, the people that I talk to and interact frequently. That does set a bit of a concern for me when I can't see that support for there. I think about one of the dads from gym class. He lives in Nio. He's mode shifted. He's got an e-bike. He loves the Nio cycleway. Looked at the ice cream art, thought that was fun. Kind of the exact person we're trying to encourage is capable and able to do mode shift and embracing it. And I asked, well, are you using the gardens? Oh no, we don't go there as a family. If we do find a park, well, there's safety issues getting both kids out on the other side of the road and crossing through. We've just stopped going there. And I think, geez, if we're losing the people that are embracing the cycle network, again, this is concerns, this is anecdotal. I would love to see the data that says, well, we've had a 5-fold increase or 2-fold increase, or we're seeing positive projections to counteract against these negative anecdotals that I'm sharing. But anecdotapalooza is where we are. Is it just a Saturday, Sunday issue? Possibly, but again, no data, anecdotapalooza. So I think we should have this debate. And something the wider council too often refuses to do is have debates on harder issues. I'm going to vote in support today of the amendment, but that is not putting support for the vote come April. I'll have concerns around costs, around safety. If NZTA funding can't be utilised, for instance, and that's going to go in the CapEx budget, while we just threw 50 mil in the other week on the kitty, so that's going to be a hard justification to spend more money. But what I suppose I'm really, really almost begging for is the most clear and comprehensive data set, because we do not know how these transport projects have been operating since June. We are in anecdotapalooza, and I suppose I found it cute when I saw the Stuff article the other week about Kent-Cambridge Terrace, referring to that as the most controversial cycleway project in the city. I mean, if I'm going by emails into the inbox, it's like 1 to 5 that versus the gardens. This stretch has hit a spark, and I just want to hear from the community either way. And if you live between Johnsonville and Linden and you think it's a good thing, please come and tell me, because I haven't heard that yet. And I guess that's my anecdotapalooza speech over.
Randall.
Thank you. I thank Councillor Calvert for bringing this forward, and for the members of the Regs Committee to hopefully support it. I first want to highlight that this is not a decision. This is really just getting some information so that the council has information on which to make decisions. And, much as we've had in previous meetings, it's not a commitment, but we do know that we need to have a look at this now because of the concerns, as Councillor McNulty, keep coming even after the cycleways have been around this area for some months. I went to the Lantern Festival to celebrate the end of the Chinese New Year, and there were a lot of people there. but there weren't as many people there as there was last time. And even though the weather was brilliant and last time was raining, I did meet a family from Tawa, mother and 3 children, and I asked, well, how did you get here? And she said, my husband dropped me off because we couldn't find a park, and that's why he wasn't there. So again, I think the access. I'd also note, as a comment from Councillor Rogers about good data makes good decisions, I would go back to the original proposal and note that there was obviously some missing data with some of the decisions. It's not part of the criteria for putting cycleways in. The impact of access to key facilities in the city, that's simply not part of anything that was considered. And I think the botanical gardens of all the areas in the central city is one of the go-to areas. And the fact that we've got it wrong in terms of removing access means that we should relook at this. Because in the end, I think, irrespective of what happens, we're here for the community, and if we get it a bit wrong, it's the putting right that counts. And the starting point is to get the information and what the options are. So I hope you do support this on this basis.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Randall. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora for the extensive debate today. I think just thank you, and I, of course, understand the intentions, and it is good to hear the submitters again. I think I won't be I cannot vote, but I don't support the amendment as such, basically because we haven't had time to understand what the patterns are and are going to be. And so while there are anecdotal stories from Tawa or Linden, I just want to throw in a few from Karori. And I did meet someone the other day that for health reasons was able to take up riding a bike to and from the city on this route, and it has been enabled by the cycleway. That is just one story, and I know that there are many more out there, but just remember that that transition is happening, but it's not happening overnight. So I think that while the data and getting this information is important, I think we should give it a while before we start picking it apart, as Patrick has said. So yeah, I don't support this amendment, but thank you for trying.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I guess thank you all for the debate on this. The first thing I would like to say is the only reason I found out about this amendment was because I had heard rumours of a notice of motion, and so I asked the chair what was happening with it. And only then was this amendment circulated very last minute, which does ask for significant work to be done by our officers. I do want to highlight that all of you have consistently talked about data, yet when I asked a question about how useful this data is going to be for us if we bring this report forward to the 9th of April, none of you seem fazed that it's not going to be the full impact of the cycleway, that it's not going to be the best data that we can actually act on. And I think it's irresponsible as a committee that some of you are willing to actively choose to make a decision on worse data. Tony Randall, you re-said what I've said before, good data makes good decisions. Bad governors choose to use bad data. And I think it would be absolutely embarrassing for anyone around this committee who prides themselves on analysing data to do it in a way that acknowledges the fact that we are having troubles with data right now, and we can share that with our community, saying, yes, we're working on it very hard, and we will listen to your concerns, and we will make appropriate decisions with good data. I mean, I heard Councillor McNulty, you used an analogy about the National Party and their changes to speed policies on a whim. And now we're talking about making changes to the safety of cyclists, knowing that the report that's going to come back isn't going to have good data. So at that moment in the future, you're forcing yourself to make a decision based on bad data, essentially about children's safety, about cyclist safety, on a whim. You said that they're different. I don't believe they are. I believe that's the exact same thing. I mean, we've heard very clearly as well that some of these things that are coming back in the report have already been considered. They were ruled out for different reasons. There were some issues with the shared path, And for anyone suggesting a shared path of cyclists and pedestrians, I would ask you only to look at the experiences that people have on the Wellington waterfront. That is not a pleasant experience for people going by footpath. So I would encourage people to acknowledge the fact that we were already going to have a report come back to this committee, that it was going to come back at a time when we could verify the data in that report, instead of making a decision about people's safety on the road on a whim. So I would recommend that you reject this, look forward to the report coming back with the appropriate advice at the appropriate time as was originally intended.
Thank you. I will speak. Councillor Abdurrahman, but
Kia ora whanau. I think we need two things to look at it. Who are we talking about? Who are those cyclists? Who are those motorists? They are the same family. Example, I'm not going to mention the name of this guy called Messi. I'm just naming him Messi. He plays football with my son. He's 13 years old. His mom and dad, they got only one car. They are the one who drop him to Karori Park when they play against Karori. This young boy, who used his mom and dad's car to be dropped off at school, used to be dropped at Karori Park. The same young boy currently competing for 200 kilometer cycling competition. He cycled to his school sometimes his family drop him. So the notion that we think we are making safe for the children only by putting cycle lane is not really true. Yes, we are making safe for them, but at the same time, we are also making for their family to drop their kids where they want to. I myself, I've been consistently in supporting this bike lanes. In my area, in the Southern Ward, big communities, they love what we have currently. And the one I specifically want to mention is by Wakefield Park, where at the time this council was a bit hesitant to make net zero car park laws. But this committee decided, I move an amendment for the net zero car park laws. Now the cyclists, they are very happy and the motorists are very happy because it's working for everyone. And that is the same kind of thing we are asking for Karori Park. When it comes to Botanic Garden, I'm sure you have all received so many emails. I'll share another friend of mine who got a two-year-old daughter who want to go to that event at Botanic Garden. He drove with his wife and he couldn't find parking. He went back and later on he told me if he wants to take a bus, it will take him about 2 hours. For him, he wanted to go there, spend 15, 20 minutes, go back and put his daughter to bed. So when we make safe and accessible for those families who want to bike, we also need to look at it, how we can make it accessible if they want to drive there. Some of them, they don't have any other options. I myself, if you ask me, I have 2 kids that I drop on, winter is coming for football, I drop them every weekend, either I or my wife. I rely on my car to drive to Johnsonville. I drive on my car to drive to Karori. So we really need to look at it the way we do. Otherwise, I'm really scared we're going to lose a lot of the progresses that we have made. And this amendment, I think, is asking to come back with some of the suggestions. We really need to look at it. We need to work. And some of the points are really articulated by Councillor McNulty. And I think that's why we are asking, bring it on. We're going to look at it. And then we make a decision based on that informed data that we're going to get it. Thank you. And one last thing that I want to mention, when it comes to this council or any committee asking officers, we are doing in a very respectful way. The notion that asking hard questions is haram itself is haram. And that attitude needs to stop. We need to ask hard questions. We need to interrogate in a good way. And we need to also criticize each other's. Haraming what is not haram itself is haram. Thank you.
I'll go first, and I'm the seconder, and then we'll have you, Councillor Foon. Oh, Councillor Chung. It's been a long day. So, I think there's been a lot of very good points raised. I think we have lost sight of the fact that this particular cycleway is a transitional cycleway, that it always was meant to be reviewed, and we were meant to be able to be responsive to concerns raised by the community. To be honest with you, I had doubts about taking out so much parking near the gardens, because even though I take a number 2 bus, it's very convenient for me and very pleasant. That's not everybody's experience trying to get to the gardens, and the gardens are an incredibly important part of our city and the amenity of our city. I think they're world-class gardens, actually. I think they're the best in New Zealand. I think they're far superior to Christchurch or Auckland. I think they're beautiful, and it saddens me that I'm hearing that people have lost access to the gardens, that they're not coming from further away with a car because they're very doubtful about whether they're going to find a park that's sufficiently close to let them walk the extra distance they need. Sometimes people are bringing equipment to the gardens, if they're going to an event in the evening or a concert. And I am actually fairly convinced, and I don't need the numbers, I think that's been a massive distraction. I'm fairly convinced that it would benefit the city to have more parking beside the gardens. I'm also convinced that this is actually achievable. There are options, and I think that when there are options, we need to look at them. I don't think there are bad options. I actually think there's several good options. For this section we're talking about, not only is it an uphill section, and we have examples in the city where we've combined cyclists going uphill with pedestrians, not only that, but it's also not that busy at the moment outside of off-peak hours, which means for a lot of people coming to the gardens, they don't come at peak hours, they come during the day, they're older, they're families. There's not actually going to be a lot of conflict with the shared path. But as well as that, there's actually another path inside the gardens. So there are actually some really legitimate options here. And I think that I've heard enough to convince me that we need to look at those options. I'm not worried about the numbers, to be really frank, because to me this is kind of a bit more of a philosophical question about why wouldn't you look at some options if you're hearing a significant amount of feedback from the public that there's a problem. I also think that, and I thank Councillor Calvert for actually her original preamble for this, which was going to be a notice of motion. In that preamble, she actually acknowledged the rest of the routes working really well. Well, you said there wasn't an issue with it, and it was working generally well. And I think coming from you, Councillor Calvert, it's good that you can actually see that it's working well, but there are a couple of issues that we could benefit from looking at. Councillor Calvert and I have actually been asking about this for about 6 months, maybe longer, 8 months. And I think we were going to be getting some sort of report on the gardens in May, and it has been agreed with the staff that we can bring that forward, and we're not going to get better data in May. This problem with the data is a really long-term problem. So we're going to be relying on the best data we've got, which will probably be from the cordon count, which will be reasonable data and comparable with what's happened the previous year. But it's, again, for me, the data's been a bit of a distraction, to be really honest. I think I can see with my own eyes that this is really well used in peak hours, really not terribly well used in off-peak hours at the moment, that there are a lot of people telling us that they need better access to the gardens, and that we actually can potentially do something about it. For me, this amendment is a little bit too specific, but I wasn't the mover of it. I'm not really very fussed on clearways. I'll be interested to see what the official advice is on that. I'm more into seeing about the shared path or the other options. But I think I appreciate that some people are not going to support this, and some people are, and we're probably not going to, this debate isn't going to shift anybody. But I am going to be supporting this. I also need to say that the other option was a notice of motion, and the staff actually preferred this at the end of the day. When we talked about how to bring this and actually put it on the agenda, they actually preferred this. And if we can't, as a committee, actually decide that we've got to a point where we want to put something on the agenda, then we actually, what is our power? What is our agency in this democratic process? So that's where I've ended up. I've agreed to second it. I've tried to explain why and where I stand. I am a strong supporter of good cycleways, but they don't need to be perfect. And that's probably where I've ended up. I have one person left. I think it's you, Councillor Chung. Or was it? Or have you already spoken? No, it's you then.
Thanks very much, Chair. In fact, you've actually taken away the thunder of a lot of things that I was going to say. But I think that I talked about the value of data before, but I think in the absence of good data, then you need to use anecdotal evidence. And that's where Councillor McNulty talked about anecdotal. Now, since this has been going on, this is all I've received. I've received anecdotal data, but I've had people say to me, well, come and have a look for yourself. You know, you come and count them yourself. You come and see when people were actually using these cycleways. So I did that. And I went down on a Monday and Thursday from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. to actually just look at how people actually use the cycleways myself. So in the morning, all the cyclists I saw came down the road, but I think that's actually the intention, because when you're coming downhill, you can move at the same speed as the traffic, so it's understandable why no one's actually using the cycleway. So the cycleway is actually used when people go home, so from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. I was up there and I counted 18 cyclists, which I thought was the reasonable number for people going home. And so, yes, this is when they're actually using it, but when you look at it at that time, of course, you're seeing commuters, you're not seeing families. So it's been been comments about we need to make children safer, we need to look after them. So, but there were no children there. They were commuters, so people who had been to work, going home from work. And so I haven't actually checked the data for accidents with children, on Glenmore Street, but and I will do. But you don't see children, riding up there during the day. So I think that's one thing we need to look at. The other thing about cycleways, and this is getting away from Glenmore Street a bit, but when I came back from Makara a couple of weeks ago, and I drove down Karori Road, and I counted the cyclists riding along Karori Road. There were 7 cyclists riding along there, and all of them were riding on the footpath. So I was thinking, why aren't they using the cycleway? Why are they riding on the footpath? Again, it seems to be a preference. If cyclists think that they're safer or better, or they're more comfortable riding on the footpath or riding somewhere else other than the cycleway, then they probably will. I just don't think we had a bit of a discussion about we should wait for the analysis after 12 months, but I think that it's evident what we're actually seeing, again anecdotal, but it's evident what's actually happening now. We're losing people not going to the gardens because they can't find car parks. And so it's my experience that when people stop doing things, when they change the habits of the way they're doing things, if they stop going to the garden now because they can't find car parks, they won't come in from the suburbs to go there, then how difficult is it going to be to change them back to coming again in 12 months' time if we actually change things? So I think that we do need to look at this now. I think it is important that that we monitor things as they go. We want to see how things are working. Last year we talked about with cycleways, we want to put in a temporary cycleway so that we can analyse exactly what's actually happening. We can analyse the use of it, whether we should actually make it a permanent cycleway. And when we removed the temporary cycleways to put in permanent ones, I was concerned that could open us up to mistakes. And I think that has actually come to fruition, that if we start putting in permanent cycleways without looking at how people are going to use these things, then I think that's a mistake. But then the reason for taking out the temporary cycleways was a cost, taking out the cost of actually redoing something. So I'm going to vote for this. I believe that probably Glenmore Street is probably the worst place to actually have a cycleway in Wellington. So I'm going to vote for this motion, and I thank Councillor Calvert for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Right of reply, Councillor Calvert. Maybe we could make it fairly tight.
Yeah. It's just that everybody's had so much to say. Look, I'm the first to admit I have never been a strong proponent of cycleways, and not because I dislike cycleways, but I just want to ensure that we do get a balance and we do make changes as we go along. And it's supported by good information, by data. I think that's really important. And for those people who think I don't cycle, I have cycled. I've even done 550 Ks around Vietnam. I just want to make that point known. But, the thing is, it's about we've got to take people along with us. And back in 2022, this council signed off on a bike network plan. It was a bit like a London Underground plan. And so it was never meant to be perfect. But unfortunately, on the Karori route, it said, well, this is how it looks, so this is where it will go. And actually, there's parts that we could have adjusted the route slightly and done it in a different way. And a lot of people in Karori told us that. And data's been used in different ways. And look, the public don't have a huge trust in how we use our data for different reasons. If we go back to, we were talking about speed management. Well, through Ian Harrison from Tail Risk Economics and followed through by Councillor Randall, we found we had an error in the calculations in our own spreadsheets about justifying speed restrictions going in, and that would have cost us millions and made changes to a city based on incorrect data that had been interpreted incorrectly. So. And thank you, Chair, because it's saying we've heard enough from people. I mean, you and I went and had a look out there last month as well and talked to people around. And this is not about getting rid of cycleways. This is still acknowledging that this is a network. It's just saying parts of it need to be done a little bit differently, and we need to look at how we can make sure that we do get that balance. And making sure, we've got to be, there's talk about being safe for children. Well, it's not, it's can we drop children off safely to the school, to the park, and making sure that we, do have that. But it is a transitional cycleway, and so we can make adjustments. And that's what we said to people when they came and presented to us. We will be agile. We will make changes if it's not quite right. And so I think what we're hearing from the community, and the people that spoke today have never been and spoken to this council before. They were all new. So whilst they may represent some groups we may have heard from, they were all new people who have chosen to come to speak to us. So look, I thank you for the support and working through this. I think we can get to a reasonable solution, and when the officers have hopefully they've got enough guidance to understand where we'd like to see, but enough flexibility that if they've got some other great ideas, then we can certainly look at them, but making sure that it is quite clear that we do really want to see a different solution to some parts that we've actually got in at the moment. So I hope you will support.
Okay, now, do we want to take anything separately? Okay, so that makes it nice and simple, I have to say. Right, so we will now vote. So we're either voting yes to the whole thing or no. And that's actually been carried. It's quite, yep. So that brings us to the most, back to the, I was going to say, the longest decision register debate we've ever had, or I hope we'll have.
Don't be so sure on that one now, we know the rules.
And now we need to go back just to vote on the whole thing. Oh, good. I'd forgotten all about that. Thank you. All right, so I believe that actually concludes our meeting when we're finished. So we're closing that vote so we can see what the outcome. Oh, Mayor Whānau.
No, I already voted in the chat.
Oh, okay. So I take it you're voting yes, are you, or no? Let's have a look.
Oh, no, I didn't press enter. My apologies. There you go.
Right. Okay, that's been passed unanimously. Right, so back to our meeting process, and we're actually concluding our meeting just in the nick of time for 1 o'clock, and I'll read the closing karakia. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te ura tapanui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takatu. Koe rā I rongo, ka ilia aki ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia. All right, thank you everybody.